Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Obviously, I'm not Councillor Samantha Ratnam, who's normally the Chair of the Urban Planning Committee, nor am I Councillor Helen Davidson, our Mayor, as she's taken sick today. And so, councillors, before we begin, could I have a motion to appoint me interim Chair for tonight's meeting, please? Moved by Councillor Natalie Abood, seconded by Councillor Mark Riley. Are there any other nominations? Being no other nominations, I put to the vote. All in favour? Against? Declare that carried. Thank you, councillors. In recognising the cultural diversity of our great city, I pay my respects to the local Indigenous people of Moreland by acknowledging that we meet on the traditional lands of the Wurundjeri people. I offer my respects to Wurundjeri elders, past and present, and to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. Members of the gallery, please note that this Urban Planning Committee meeting is being recorded and web streamed live to Council's website. This recording will also be available as video on demand. Gallery attendees are advised that they will be recorded during this meeting. Councillors are reminded that in line of the adopted Councillor Code of Conduct principles and outlined in the Councillors Code of Conduct, councillors should ensure that they conduct themselves in this meeting with integrity, impartially exercising their responsibilities in the interest of the local community, and not improperly to seek and confer advantage on any person. This behaviour will support principles of leadership and good governance that secures public confidence in the role of councillor. Now, in attendance tonight, we have Councillor Natalie Abood, we have Councillor Sue Bolton, Aye. Councillor Ali Infatali, Councillor Dale Martin, right. Councillor Mark Riley, Councillor Labros Tapanos. Officers in attendance tonight, we have the Group Manager of City Development, to my left, Philip Priest, Planning Coordinator Robert Chatford, Planning Coordinator Darren Camilleri, Planning Coordinator Narelle Jennings, Planning Coordinator Mark Hughes, and Governance Officer Saskia Hunter. Councillors, I've had apologies from Councillor Ratnam, Councillor Davidson and Councillor Carla Hannon. Could I have a motion that these apologies be accepted, please? Moved by Councillor Sue Bolton, seconded by Councillor Martin. I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried. Now, is there any other apologies for tonight's meetings?
I believe there may have been an apology circulated from Councillor Oscar Yildiz.
Okay. Yes. I'm happy to
some
take
time
that.
ago.
Okay, I'm happy to take that. So, Councillor Tapanos and seconded by Councillor Bolton. I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried. Councillors, could I have a motion for the adoption of the minutes of the meeting of the UPC held on the 24th of November 2006? Moved by Councillor Riley. Do I have a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Abood. Is there any debate on this item? Being no debate, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried. Councillors, are there any interests or conflicts of interest to declare tonight? Councillor Abood.
Yes, I have a conflict of interest with Pentridge application.
Good. Okay. We'll note that, and at that time in the meeting, we'll ask you to be excluded from the meeting. So we're looking at conflict in DED 9316, 21 Pentridge Boulevard. That's noted for the minutes, and thank you, Councillor Abood. Any other declarations of conflicts of interest? No further declarations? Okay, we'll move on. I'll just give you an outline as to how the Urban Planning Committee will operate tonight. The relevant planner will introduce the item and the officer's recommendation. I'll then give objectors the opportunity to move to the lectern and to make their submission. After this time, the applicant will be given the opportunity to speak. If you are making a submission, please state clearly your name and address for the record. If you're requested to present viewpoints clearly and concisely on why you support or oppose the application. Please try not to repeat what other speakers have said and keep the discussion focused on relevant issues and points not previously raised. If you are opposed to a planning application, it'd be good to hear from the committee why you're opposed and suggest an alternative approach which would satisfy your concerns. Please use this opportunity to focus on your concerns rather than matters in the officer report. Please note there is a limit of 3 minutes to each speaker, but as chairperson, I reserve the right to increase or reduce that time of any speaker. So we'll begin with the presentation of reports. The first report to consider tonight is DED 8916, which is for 3137 Stewart Street. It also includes 12 to 20 Harding Street, Brunswick. And I'll ask the officer to talk to that for the moment, please.
Thank you, Councillor. On the screen is the initial image of the proposal. So as the Councillor mentioned, the application relates to land at 31 to 37 Stewart Street and 12 to 20 Hardy Street in Brunswick. This item was considered at the Urban Planning Committee in August, where it was resolved that Council's position at the Victorian Civil and Administrative Tribunal would be a refusal. Also in August, there was a compulsory conference that was conducted at VCAT. Following that compulsory conference, there's been a further set of amended plans that have been circulated to Council and notified to surrounding residents. The amended plans make some changes to the proposal, which includes reducing the dwelling yield from 75 to 59 dwellings, deleting some of the third stories of some of the apartments, and increasing the communal open space from 150 square metres to 500 square metres. I'll just quickly go through the planning controls, which you can see up on the screen. The land is currently zoned neighbourhood residential, and the front portion of the site where it faces Stewart Street is within a heritage overlay. The proposal currently contains a number of industrial buildings. Most of them will be removed, except for a building here and some walls around the perimeter of the site that interface with the properties that face Connolly Street. In terms of the ground floor layout, the proposal is a townhouse proposal. There's a vehicle entry point from Stewart Street that leads to a number of garages through the site and exits out through there. These are the correct plans. So it's the entry through there, and you can see a series of dwelling entries, garage doors, that type of thing. So there's an entry onto Hardy Street. There's a further vehicle entry off Hardy Street here that provides access to 9 car parking spaces. And this area here is also a publicly available pedestrian link connecting Hardy Street and Stewart Street. This is the communal open space that I mentioned previously. This is the first floor level. Some of the apartments rely on balconies for their open space. The property's through the second floor or the third story, and you can see the third story of the proposal is concentrated to this portion of the site, with all the dwellings through there remaining at a 2-storey scale. And the roof plan level shows that some of the dwellings have the recommendation is to support the proposal, subject to a number of conditions. Thank you. The recommendation is to support the proposal, subject to a number of conditions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. It's now time for the objectors. Is there an objector that would like, a lady with her hand up? Would you like to lead us off, please?
Hi, my name is Vanessa Lowry from 19 Hardy Street. I actually attended the meeting we had in August where I think we were all in support of refusing the proposal. What came out of that meeting was that no one in Hardy Street had been notified of the development, and it came as quite a surprise. Yes, the plans have been amended, but they haven't been amended in reflection of Hardy Street's feedback on the development, and as such, none of our concerns have been addressed. So I'm a little disappointed with the proposal put forward tonight, where I don't see some key issues that we discussed in August haven't been addressed, and they're namely around parking and traffic in a very small street. From a personal perspective, I see it as a lazy design, and an opportunity to be innovative and creative has been missed. I'm surprised that such a large expanse of land doesn't allow for any backyards, and all outdoor space is limited to roof gardens and balconies. There was a chance to do something really creative, I think, and link it in with the community, and instead we've got these tall walls that shut it off, and people would be socialising on their rooftops, which is a little odd. From my personal perspective, I live across the road from the proposed entry-exit way on Hardy Street. Hardy Street has no off-street parking. Everyone parks on the street. And as such, there's only room for one car to pass in either direction at a time. So the traffic report that was put forward in the developer's proposal is, and in addition, we're prepared to do our own if that is lacking. From a parking perspective, the streets are full. Again, the traffic report didn't call that out. And the proposal has reduced the number of car parks by 59 car parks from what we would see as a normal car parking allocation for a development of that size. So I'm surprised there's support for that, given the pressure on small streets, which isn't just Hardy, it's Stewart, Mountfield and Albion would be impacted as well. Traffic is a real concern. I'm not sure how such small streets can support such a large number of proposed cars. There's hardly any visitor car parking. They've kept it at 3, which is what they had in August. So I don't know where the visitors would park, but else on the street. The height hasn't been addressed from a Hardy Street perspective, so there's still triple storey, which is outside the residential zoning, with a rooftop terrace, so in my view, effectively 4 storeys. They haven't addressed how noise and waste will be handled from a Hardy Street perspective. All I've seen is it's purely from a Connolly Street perspective, and that's because when they came out with their initial proposal, they only engaged Connolly Street for that. Me personally, I haven't been approached around my concerns. There's been no consultation with the Hardy Street community. I think I speak for all of us that we'd welcome development of the site. It's not a question of that, but I would expect it to be done in a consultative process where we can get a mutually beneficial outcome. At the moment, we have warehouses with businesses, with vans going constantly. So it would be a welcome change to have some residents in there, but let's have the right approach. Let's minimise the impact on the community and on us who are a big fan of Brunswick and Hardy Street and want to retain its character. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we have another objector that would like to speak? Yes, thank you, sir.
Apologies, I've just got off my bike, so I'm a bit hot and sweaty. I'll just reiterate, my name's Mark Phillips. I live in 17 Hardy Street with my wife Deborah and 2 young children, and we've lived there for 12 years. And I'll reiterate some of the points that Vanessa's made, and I also wrote to all the councillors on Monday night, I think it was, outlining some
Excellent
concerns.
email address, by the way, Captain Phillips.
Again, we also understand that the neighbourhood is changing, that it's transforming from a light industrial area to a mixture of residential, and we're not trying to stand in the way of which was developed pre-car ownership. So it's a narrow street. It was developed pre-car ownership. So it's a narrow street. It's got a dog leg. We measured it the other day, and I would raised doubts about the measurements that the traffic consultants have provided. When you think about two cars being parked, and they're not hard up against the curb, a bit of a space from them to the curb, you've got, if you're lucky, 3 metres gap. So there's no way you can consider that a two-way street when most of the residents park in the street, and only one car can pass at a time. But just to go into some detail, so as I said, it's typical. Times it's really hard to move around in all of those streets at present. So I'd ask the councillors to consider that when you're making your decision. Secondly, the actual traffic counts that they've provided were based on one day. It was a weekday. Anybody who lives in the Brunswick area knows that a lot of people use their cars more on weekends, working inside the area than maybe even walking. So a traffic count should be measured over a number of days, not just based on one particular day. It was also a day just at the tail end of the school holidays. So I think you should also take that into account. We would, and even if you accept those traffic measures are accurate, it's a significant increase in traffic volume that they're forecasting, even if they're being conservative. 379 traffic movements a day through the streets in the area. We would assume that, given that one of the entrances and exits two of the entrances and exits are through Hardy Street, half of that traffic has to be through Hardy Street, just through the sheer physical location of the entrances and exits. Thirdly, the location of the entrances and exits are going to cause problems for people who are parked in the street. There's already been numerous incidents where cars have been dented or hit by cars coming out of the driveways of the factories and the offices where they are at present. Increase that exponentially, and you're going to have an increase in those kinds of incidents, plus the fact that there are a lot of young children playing in the street or riding their bikes, etc. So we would urge the committee, before going ahead with a recommendation, to seek some further advice on the traffic. Independent advice, not provided by the developer, but independent, and to take into consideration those factors of the narrowness of the street and the hazards posed by increased traffic.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for the
Mark.
opportunity.
Thank you. Do we have another objector that would like to speak? Yes, lady at the back.
My name's Lynn Dennis, and you're getting hit with all the Hardy Street people at the minute. I'm up from number 15 Hardy Street. I was one of the people who wasn't advised primarily, and when we were advised, we were told that the consideration by council would be starting again and by VCAT. As Vanessa said, none of the issues that we raised to VCAT or to council have been addressed. I support everything that both Mark and Vanessa have said. I am concerned about some of the things that have been in the council report, such as the clearance into Hardy Street, that there's enough turnout if the cars are going forward. But we now have 5 garages facing Hardy Street. At some point, they either have to reverse in or reverse out. If it is only enough room one way, how are they going to do that? And do they become unusable, therefore putting more cars onto the street? The number of near misses through the dog legs and around into Mountfield Street is enormous. People go very carefully, but people use it as a rat run to avoid Sydney Road and Lygon Street. And the turnout onto Albion Street is dangerous because it's on a slight downhill slide. You can't see. You're halfway up before you can see what's coming. And an increase in traffic is only going to increase that. If you want to head towards the city, you won't turn to Albion Street because your only way through is Sydney Road, because you can't turn right into Lygon Street. So you're pushing more traffic out into Mountfield Street and through into those side streets. Having 2 exits, with most of the exits for those apartments into Hardy Street is ridiculous. I don't see why one of them an extra one can't go out into Stewart Street, which has direct exits out to Sydney Road and to Lygon Street, where the two coming out into Hardy Street is just going to increase that run. The main exit is 7 metres at best from people's bedroom windows. So at night, those lights are going to go directly into people's bedroom windows and create a real quality of life issue for them. Also, Hardy Street is the only place now that is going to get those 3 stories. There is no setback, there is no greenery. We will continue to have a brick wall, except it will be higher. The overshadowing will be worse. And in fact, the whole nature, Hardy Street are all 1-storey houses with small gardens in front. Yes, they are small, typical of Brunswick. But this is only going to get worse. That end is just going to remain a concrete jungle, but higher. And I would, as Vanessa said, I would like to see Council's decision postponed until such time as we can have more consultation and at least see that some of our concerns have been addressed. We will be organising a traffic engineer to attend the VCAT conference with us to give advice on the traffic issues because we don't believe that that's been properly dealt with, and we certainly don't believe the developer's traffic report.
Thank you so much. Thanks. Are there any other objectors? Yes.
Nick Dolby, Holbrook Crescent, West Brunswick. I'm
Can I
objecting
just
to...
ask Nick, are you an official objector to this one or
No.
not?
Can I
Okay,
go?
I'll let you speak, but I think, yeah, actually, I must see if there's any other people who have objected first, and then I'll come back to you.
This one?
Any other objectors? No, you're right? Okay, go.
All right.
Oh, there's this gentleman here. I'll go to the official objectors first, if that's right, Nick. Sorry. Yes, sir.
My name is John Price from
Yep.
28 Hardy Street, Brunswick. I support actually everything that has been said by the
Yeah.
other Hardy Street residents who are attending, and so I
Yeah.
won't bore you by going through that again, except to say how right they are. Additionally, I'd like to point out that in the course of developing the present proposal, the number of stories in the next street was reduced from 3 to 2. And at the moment, the number of stories that are permitted for the houses overlooking Hardy Street backyards is still 3. And we would argue that all parts of this proposal have the same character, the same considerations apply, so treating like cases alike. I think Hardy Street should also be considered for a 2-storey limit, especially considering that our backyards aren't overlooked at all at the moment, and those would be overlooked from 2 different levels with the 3-storey proposal in that. That's it.
Thank you very much indeed. I think there was a lady over here, was there? Yes, thank you. Thank you, John.
Good evening. My name's Stella Barter-Wong. I'm a resident of 35 Hardy Street, but I'm speaking on behalf of Catherine Fisher, who's also a resident of that address. Firstly, I'd like to address all Green members here today. It's neighbourhoods like ours that have led to your election. I call upon you now to honour these promises and protect our rights and our planet. I ask that you do not allow these developments to go through the way they are, no matter how much pressure you're facing. We have come up with acceptable and reasonable solutions and compromises on the 12 grounds that these developments will ruin neighbourhood character, infringe on personal freedoms, and create significant traffic issues with no carbon offset measures currently in place to mitigate the emissions that a development like this would create, not only during its building process, but long into the future. Grounds 3 and 6 protect our privacy by voting against rooftop privacy stealing decks. Even with the planning revision of no access to these areas, there are clear pre-built roof deck walls that fail to comply with the community's screening requests, that the developer is clearly trying to slide past planning. All that need happen in the future is for a separate planning permit to be put forth to open a roof hatch or an internal stairwell. That will jeopardise rooftop and backyard privacy for Hardy Street, Stewart Street, Connolly, and in some cases with the 3 stories, could possibly even exceed the view up past backyards into Mountfield Street. I agree with all of my fellow objectors on their traffic issues, although I'd like to offer a solution. By converting a 3- and 4-storey level apartment to a 2-storey, 3-bedroom double-fronted apartment, including 2 car parks underground, that would equate to lesser parking demand and more parking to meet the new residents' requirements, while keeping all residents' cars on site and only allowing for off-site or street parking for visitors and deliveries. Alternately, you could provide 118 new car parks on site for residents and provide existing households with a minimum of 2 parking permits to protect their access to their homes. Approving the current proposal, its outcomes seem unrealistic and unmanageable. I therefore draw your attention back to the outlined solutions as indicated in motions 5.1 and 5.2 of our objection. To summarise my many concerns and fears about this development, I feel that building these 3-storey apartments would do irreversible damage to our neighbourhood, community ethics and aesthetics. It would disrupt our lives and bring many unwanted hazards to our streets. I urge the councillor here today to read our proposals and our objections, motions 1 through 12, so that we can consider living in a sustainable future and continue to live with dignity and respect in our area. As a solution to the rooftop gardens, we see that there is currently a lot of dead space there. If they're removed and there's no access, why would you need to build and waste resources on building a 3rd storey that's not going to be accessed? We would like to propose that you give purpose to this dead space by installing high wattage solar systems if it's true that they're not going to be accessed, and that would be in support of the Council's zero carbon evolution policy.
Thank you. Thank you, Stella. Yes.
Thanks for the opportunity to talk to you tonight. My name's Sally. I'm at 18 Connolly Street. It's a long process, and I know that many of us would like this done and done. But I also was disappointed with the planning report before you tonight. And I think I'd like to just say that a couple of things and ask the councillors to please not support the application going forward at this time. There is a number of outstanding severe issues of external amenity that have not been addressed. If anything, I think the report papers over that and concentrates a lot on what is internal amenity improvements. When they went down from 75 apartments down to 59, most of that benefit went internal into things that we hadn't actually objected to. So they've made their parklet a little bit more of a park. They've given more, they've made some of the nice townhouses more bigger luxury townhouses. With all that reduction in townhouse numbers, they've not actually managed to reduce the visual bulk footprint along Connolly Street, so we see unbroken impact. Yes, it has been articulated, some of the second stories are set back, but it's inadequate. The vision for this area is neighbourhood residential zone as far as we're concerned. The council hasn't indicated that any other scheme would be applicable at this point. So 12 metres for rooftop gardens isn't supportable at this time. I don't think that that is a issue. I was spoken to today by number 29 Stewart Street, which is the very big house that is surrounded on 2 sides. Michael Tucker spoke to me today, rang me today, did not know about the council meeting tonight, has not been sent a letter, was not identified by planning as an objector or a party to the proceedings, which he is. last thing to just ask the council to get back to me on, or the councils or planning. Contrary to claims, council's request for information thing to just ask the council to get back to me on, or the councils or planning. Contrary to claims, council's request for information was used, it lapses. An application that lapses cannot be recommenced. A new application is required. Why are we here tonight, still 12 years later? Why are we here again? Why was this not lapsed when a 2008 application came into your planning department, was not identified as much, was allowed to coast through the whole year? Moreland Council never got to see and assess any plans, and on the back of it has seemed to have assumed that, or have taken the developer's word that you were outside of time. I would just like to give copies of this. The legal advice that I have is council was in time.
Thanks very much.
There is a calendar on the back, and perhaps council could get back to me and just maybe get a ruling from you.
Thank you very much.
So with outstanding matters, I'd just like to say that I strongly believe it's premature for council to support it at this stage. We're not happy. I'm in Connolly Street. I went to the compulsory conference. I did not get what I wanted, and I'm not happy either.
Okay. Thank you for that submission. And do we have a, yes, the gentleman outside in the foyer?
My name's Matthew Wood. I live at 40 Stewart Street. What I would like to say first off is, until last week, we had no idea about this development at all. Now, we've lived at Stewart Street for 14 years. We've been notified of previous development attempts. This one, haven't heard anything. So I think the developer's consultation process has been extremely limited and probably questionable in its value. We are directly affected. Our car, we have to park on Stewart Street, and our car has been hit probably 4 times in the last 4 years. So an increase in traffic flow is actually going to present a substantial problem for us in that respect. The other thing I would like to say, along with other speakers, is that the traffic study in the report is manifestly inadequate. It's done during a school holiday break, it's done during a weekday. It doesn't really account for the heavy traffic usage on weekends. And the other thing that it is starting to become more and more apparent is that, of course, people are beginning to park in Stewart Street and then catch the train into the city. So Stewart Street's also becoming something of a daytime parking area because there are no sort of parking permits and no parking restrictions or anything like that. So Stewart Street, along with all the other neighbouring streets, is actually going to find it very difficult to deal with the increased traffic flow, which, reading the report, seems to be highly underestimated, I would suspect. And the other issue is just simply the loss of amenity for neighbouring properties. The setback is not sufficient. The height of the buildings is not appropriate for what is a residential area. And all of this is actually going to have a distinct impact on people's general quality of life and probably diminish the reasons as to why they chose to live in Brunswick and have their families in Brunswick in the first place. So anyway, I won't say anything more because everything's already been said, but thank you for your time.
No, thank you very much for the way you presented it too. Thank you. Do we have any other objectors who would like to speak? Okay, Nick, I'll go to you then, and then, no, sorry, you want to speak? Okay.
Nick Dolby, Holbrook Crescent, West Brunswick. 25 years ago, I lived at 41 Stewart Street, a 2-storey building visible in that picture there. I then lived for several years at number 12 Mountfield Street, where I could see the Hardy Street facade and so on. I'd like to address a couple of issues. First of all, heritage is my two biggest concerns are heritage and the rooftops. I believe that all the brick walls on Hardy Street contribute to the heritage nature of that streetscape, and I believe they should be retained. I lived at 41 Stewart Street. It's a two-storey house. I had the front bedroom, I had a balcony, I could see in other people's front yards. But from our rear windows, of course, we could see in 4 or 5 people's backyards. In other words, overlooking into other people's backyards has been present in this since 1888. Overlooking occurs in Brunswick. Then I moved to Mountfield Street. By the way, I lived in Stewart Street. I had no problems with parking. I didn't own a car. Public transport was perfectly adequate. I lived in Mountfield Street with my partner and our young child. We didn't own a car. Public transport was perfectly adequate. We also had a garden that was concrete. These gardens are going to have more green dirt than the garden at number 12 Mountfield Street. Traffic has always, for the last 25 years, been a problem in this area. It is getting worse recently. More and more cars are owned by local residents. Local residents who own cars are taking up more and more parking spots. I'm sorry, motor vehicle owners complaining about other motor vehicle owners always gets me a bit. Finally, though, rooftops. We live in Mediterranean climate. We don't live in the Northern Hemisphere in the high latitudes. We don't need pitched roofs. Mediterranean houses, what do they have? Flat roofs, roof gardens, utilisation of that space. This is what for 2 reasons they have flat roofs. Not only utilising that space in a land poor areas, but also because flat roofs actually heat up less. Having roof gardens will reduce urban heat island effect, will reduce heating and cooling costs on these buildings. Having roof gardens and livable flat roofs improve the suburb, not only for the dwellers of those residences, but for its entirety. I strongly support the Urban Planning Committee to support the use of roof gardens throughout Moreland. That's all I've got.
Thank you, Nick. All right. Kelvin, you'd like to speak? I think you're the final speaker, I think. Any other objectors that would like to speak?
I would strongly encourage anyone else from Conley or any of the other streets who wish to have their say, even if it's just...
They've been invited, Kelvin. You've got your final chance here.
I just wanted to say that I agree with all of that.
Okay, please come up. That's right.
Okay.
Good.
Sorry, I don't really have anything prepared.
That's fine.
But Rachel Knott from 13 Hardy Street.
Yep.
My partner Pat. I just wanted to say that we are in full support of all of the other objectives.
Thank you very much. All right. Yep.
My name's Joe Rakiki. I live 16 Conley Street. We'll basically agree with everybody said before, but I'll be surrounded with the property. We'll have units on my south side, and I will have units on the west side of the building. So basically, I will have a fence 2.7 metres high, which I don't agree with to begin with. Secondly, I've asked the developer and Megan to explain why on the top roof, on the rooftop, they have a square box to begin with, and also got a parapet of about 500 centimetres, half a metre high, which is not necessary. It's blocking light. To me, that's a de facto rooftop, which basically eventually I can put a LED on the outside, climb up there and do it. I recommend that the council should put a caveat on the property such that the rooftop cannot be built in that area whatsoever. Not only for Conley Street area, but also for Hardy Street area. It goes above the limit of the urban area requirements, which is basically 8 metres. That's 12 metres high. That's not acceptable.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Kelvin, speak now if I ever hold your peace. Yes, you may.
Sorry, I'm Mark Phillips's partner or wife, and I
That's fine.
didn't really want to speak, but there's two things I want to say here. That report says that Connolly Street residents have basically had their conditions smoothed over. That is clearly not the case. We've had two people just stand up and say that's not the case. I am terribly worried about the state of the sightlines, particularly with sorry, I'm very upset. But I'm particularly worried about the sightlines for children, particularly riding their bikes and walking along Hardy Street and Mountfield Street with all these additional cars and the cars backing up. I'm very worried that our children are going to get hit by a car. And this report is absolutely bogus. And I think when as Lynn said, we produced our own parking and traffic report, that this council's going to look stupid. And you've got to be careful, because you're going to look stupid at BCAT if you support this development. It's very upsetting to see this completely disregard what residents have got to say, and we really feel that we have been uninformed in this process. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you. Right, last chance. Yep. It's looking at a lot of documentation there, remember? We've only got 3 minutes, Calvin.
Yep, no, okay, so
I'll start something out. First, I'd like to thank the council for this opportunity. I'd like to hand out something for, especially for the new councillors, to draw your attention back to some really great work that was done in August, which as residents we greatly appreciate. If you could just flick through those 3 pages while we speak, we'd greatly appreciate that. What this is pointing to is the fact that I feel a very good motion, which Bill you'll be well aware of, was raised. Actually, you guys can share it.
I'll share with Bill.
Okay. So, the first part is,
we're here because we love our neighbourhood character, love our single-storey suburbs. We're willing to share. We're willing to see a neighbourhood character respecting development go in, and we are not that yet. I think it's very clear from the level of objection that you've had here tonight, a few days before Christmas. This is an exceptional number of people. 93 objections is a large number, but it's not just about numbers. The reason we're here is because we need the councillors' help. We need the councillors' help to fix a broken process that's brought us to this place. There are so many breaks in the process, whether or not this should have just been wiped out within months by planning, and this whole transitional thing should have gone by the by and they've had a new application under the neighbourhood residential zone clean, rather than this crazy QC-driven clawing back at something that, even if they get it, will only give them, it's 8 metres in the neighbourhood residential zone now, it will give them 9. Because 9 metres was the old limit under the old general residential zone. The moorland policy, which is, if we're looking at the neighbourhood character policy, which is 2201 at the moment, says they can go 1 storey higher than the surrounding neighbourhood. It's a single-storey neighbourhood character area. So if you look through the resolution there, which came out of the August committee, it makes a very clear statement. The problems still exist. There is still 12.3 metres going straight up in Hardy Street. There are still, after a developer claimed to have removed the rooftop decks, if you can see that handout we've given you there in red, please take a good look at it. Because that huge big square there that's highlighted in red, that is a parapet. It's a 1.2 to 1.3 metre edge. All the other parapets, in inverted commas, are about 40 centimetres. It's huge. It's bigger than the decks they deleted when they promised all the Connolly Street residents they would delete them. So I suppose moving from some of these high headlines there, I'd just like to quickly hand out one more thing, and that is we've got roof decks hiding in plain sight, and now we've got...
The sun is this?
Yep. No, this... Okay, so we've got roof decks in Connolly Street hiding in plain sight and we've promised to remove them. This is what our poor friends in Hardy Street are being asked to put up with. Within 9 metres, within 9 metres, 2 levels of overlook, not even ResCo compliance, and ResCo compliance is not the be-all and end-all, a 30% see-through screen that's 1.7 metres. They haven't even bothered to go to that level. So there are so many holes. The fact that we're asking for a rejection, let's be clear, we're asking for the council to reject, not only on the grounds put forward, because if this took 4 pages of extra special conditions being tacked on top of something that's been kicking around for 6 months since they put it in August, and 3 months after a mediation, with this level of clarity of objection as to what's required and clarity in the policy, which is basically 2-storey limits. This needs to be rejected, not only on the basis of what's being said by the planning department, but the residents have got together with a planner and an architect and have put forward 12 motions. They're elaborated grounds. I believe they've been emailed out to everybody. We need your help. Put simply, we need your help to put and pass these motions. Motion 1 is simply 8 metres under the NRZ or a 9 metre top. Motion 2 is around the fact that both the current policy and the old transitional neighbourhood character policy would only give them 2 storeys higher than the neighbourhood character of the area.
We're up to 4 minutes, Kelvin, from the time you've got to lectern. I'm going to give you another 2 minutes and that's it.
Okay, I greatly appreciate it. What I should do to show the councillors the level of well thought through, deeply held concerns with this process is to show you this. This, you know what you've had emailed out to you, those motions? This is 30. Produced in the last week, signed off by residents all through this area, from Stewart Street to Conley Street to Hardy Street to Farmer Street. Residents are scared of the impact of this thing. This is a neighbourhood character smashing development, and we need your protection. We are pleading for your protection. It's 2 days before Christmas. We need it. These motions, if you put and pass them, will bring the moorland planning policies to bear, will toughen the rejection, and will mean when this goes to the mediation, you'll be standing shoulder to shoulder with us, which is what we as ratepayers and long-term residents who have respected the neighbourhood character and had our extensions that fit within these policies deserve. We need you to protect us, so please look to put and pass motion 1, motion 2 to keep it to a 2-storey on the boundary limit, removing the 3rd-storey roof decks, because they've already been refused in the local area under a VCAT ruling only a year ago, or under the old zone. So they're claiming this access to this transitional zone suddenly gives them access to break that rule. To shut down these hidden in plain sight 3rd-storey decks, to remove the 4th-storey decks that literally will look into John's backyard and all of his friends and neighbours and destroy the peace and quiet and access to sunshine that we bought into Brunswick and live for. We're willing to share with 2 stories.
Thank you, Kelvin. I've given you 6, so I'm going to ask you to finish now, all right?
Okay. I'd like to thank you all for your time, both now and beforehand, and to clarify, if we can do the right thing by the residential quality of life and neighbourhood character by passing the motions in this, putting them and then passing them, we believe that the developer will respond to that by coming back with a much, much better response to the mediation. But if you don't, you are leaving the residents to do the heavy lifting and allowing a report that has so many holes that doesn't even mention in the exec summary that there's a 12.3 metre wall going up out of Hardy Street.
Thank you very much, Willie.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Kelvin.
Please put these motions. We need you to do that. Thank you.
Okay. Is there a representative from the applicant here tonight?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks for the opportunity to represent the permit applicant in respect of this matter. I just wanted to start by giving you some context. This is a very large...
Sorry, what was your name, sir?
Greg Tobin.
Tobin, thank you, Greg.
This is a very large site, and we're pleased to hear that the community recognises that it's a site where a development outcome that has development potential will occur. The process, councillors, in this matter is that it's before the tribunal. There has been a mediation. Through that mediation process, the developer has sought to address concerns. It's clear that there are still concerns. What's changed between this development being before you in August and this development being before you today? There's been a number of substantial changes to the development. You've heard about the number of apartments. There's the retention of the existing brick walls facing the Connolly Street residents. There's increased common space. Critically, we would say, councillors, that what's changed is that there's now the support of the expert town planners within council for the grant of a permit. So, in supporting the proposal, if you look at the position of the previously, now the position been a substantial movement in that respect. I wanted to address a couple of issues. The first issue was the car parking issue that's been put to you. Council's report that you have in front of you that you're considering this evening at page 19 and 20 indicates that Council's internal traffic experts are satisfied with both the traffic implications and also with the number of remarks that are on. Indeed, at the bottom of page 19, you'll see that the officers have quoted that council policy is to support reduced car parking rates in developments within and close proximity to activity centres with excellent access to a range of different. So, with respect, we don't agree with the traffic report we've put up, but ignore ours, and we'd ask you to concentrate on what the council traffic people have done. I wanted to briefly address the issue of notification. I'm a little bit surprised to hear that people haven't been made aware. Through the last mediation process, an extensive re-sweep and really a recommencement of addresses provided by the council and worked out with the consent of the council has occurred, and that's been followed to the letter. So we would expect those letters have gone out, but if there are people here who want more information tonight, I'll be available to discuss the matter. This is a proposal which is on a large site, which we would say does respond sensitively to its boundaries. 3-storey removed from Connolly Street, where it faced onto backyards. Yes, there's still 3-storey on Hardy Street, but of course the Hardy Street frontage is separated from dwellings by road. So it's a bit different to be directly abutting to the backyard, and it's a response which we think is a good response in all of the circumstances. It's a balanced proposal now, and we would ask for the councillors' support.
Okay, thank you, Greg. Do any councillors have any questions for the applicant? You told us in August that it was an application worth approving, and yet this is a much reduced application. My question is, why does it take refusals to if you like, improve the application?
Yeah. It's a good question, councillor. Yeah. If you recall, when I presented to you in August, I presented to you on the basis that we'd been relatively recently engaged, we'd been working with the applicant, and that we would be tabling a revised proposal to the VCAT mediation. And that revised proposal is substantially the same as the plans which we've now committed to on a public basis. So our position really hasn't changed since August. The official intensive development, But what I spoke to and what I was committing to on behalf of the developer on that occasion was a proposal more or less very, very close to the one that's before you now. So hopefully you'll see that there is a consistency in that position.
Okay, thank you, Greg. All right, well, thank you very much, Greg.
Thank you.
Do any councillors have any questions for the officers? Yes, Councillor Bolton.
Well, I'd certainly like to get a response, if possible, to the information or the legal advice. Obviously, you know, the council officers present aren't necessarily lawyers. The question of a permit lapsing if all of the information to support an application hasn't been supplied within 28 statutory days, because it certainly does seem quite amazing that an application could go in under the old zone just before the new zones came in, but the supporting documentation not be tabled till well after. That's my understanding of what happened. So it'd be great to get.
Yep, sure. To some extent, council will need to take that question on notice because there is a detailed review needed of the file. The quick review of the system that the officers have undertaken on this information just becoming available is that, yes, a request for further information was submitted. A response to that was, the request was made within 28 days. There was a response to that, and there was a number of requests for extension of time to provide that. And so we need to go back and work through those dates as to whether they were then satisfied and then whether the failure appeal was lodged within time as well. So given that this has just come up tonight, we can't answer with the exact details of everything at this point in time. What I would suggest is that officers undertake that review so that there is a response back to all parties to the appeal and back to this committee on our analysis of the facts of those dates, and that if that analysis indicates that the legal advice is correct, that we make that known to VCAT so that VCAT can consider that advice in the light of the hearing that they have before them. Now, what I would also say...
I'm sorry, I'm not going to take any more from the public. I understand your interest in the matter and I'm apologetic of that, but... Yeah.
Yep. What I would also say is in circumstances where there's been, I guess, questions of procedural issues that have come up before VCAT, such as a appeal was lodged when for failure, for example, to make a decision, and council and that case was or that appeal was lodged within the 60-day time frame, and therefore could be submitted to be invalid. VCAT have found ways to address that through the VCAT process and still hear the matter, given that all parties are at that hearing. So there are mechanisms that the tribunal has to deal with these issues. What's important is that we provide them with the facts from council's point of view as to the timeframes. That hasn't been raised by officers or determined by office to be an invalid application at this time, but we will double check that.
Okay, thank you. I have a question from the officers regarding notification. Do we have a list of who was notified? Particularly, I'm concerned about 29 Stewart Street, which is immediately abutting the property, and there was some in Harding Street as well. Sorry,
Can you give me a moment?
I'll give you, yep. The councillor's happy to wait for this information.
Okay,
yeah,
I'm
fine.
interested.
Okay.
Well, I can't speak for everybody.
Yeah, but
I'd
I need the electronic version on file.
Okay, that's all right. All right. Thank you. I appreciate it. All right, councillors, do we have anyone that would like to? Yes, Councillor Bolton.
I've got a motion, a rejection motion, that council's position at the VCAT remains that no planning permit be issued for the partial demolition of the existing buildings and the construction of dwellings with a reduction of the car parking requirement at 3137 Stewart Street, Brunswick, and 1220 Hardy Street, Brunswick, on the following grounds of refusal. 1, the proposed reduction in car parking for the residents and visitors will adversely impact residentially zoned on-street car parking, which is contrary to clause 52.06 car parking of the Moreland Planning Scheme. 2, the development's 3-storey scale, including the roof decks, fails to respect the prevailing fine-grained double and single houses of Stewart and Hardy Streets, which is contrary to clause 22.01 neighbourhood character and clause 55.03-2 building height objective of the Moreland Planning Scheme.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Bolton. So we have a mover for a refusal. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Farnley. Okay, therefore you may speak further, Councillor Bolton, if you wish.
I'm putting forward a refusal. It doesn't pick all of the points that residents, and I would have liked to have included more of those points. But I feel if the Urban Planning Committee tonight does issue a refusal to grant a permit, that will allow an opportunity for residents to engage in a mediation at VCAT, which will hopefully allow some of the other issues to be resolved, particularly on Hardy Street, but I understand from listening to residents that there are issues still on Connolly Street. I went for a drive down Hardy Street the other day just to get a visual feel in terms of the traffic. It was during the daytime, it wasn't at night, but certainly that really definitely bore out. The email that one of the residents sent to councillors about the width between, when there's cars parked on both sides, it's extremely narrow street. You can barely get a single car down that street. I haven't carefully investigated all of the streets, but, that is really clear, and especially with the blown corner. I also feel, it's just not a realistic argument to say that, if you reduce car parking, it means people stop using cars. I just think people work we don't know people's lives. Some people will do without a car, other people won't be able to get away with doing without a car, depends on their children, whether they've got a family member who's got a disability, where their jobs are located, all sorts of things are factors in why people might have cars or not have cars. I also feel that the reduction of the height of the whole complex, in my belief, it should be, limited at 2-storey with the deletion of the roof decks, I think is important. I think we do have to listen to residents and what residents feel works. And my feeling is, in terms of the arguments, proposals, suggestions put forward by the residents, is that they're trying to think about what would make a workable development. They're not basically saying no development on the site. They're trying to think about ways of making the development more workable for residents and for the neighbourhood, and to integrate this development in with the neighbourhood. So that's why I'm arguing for a refusal of permit.
Councillor Farnley.
Thank you. I want to start by thanking the residents for really coherently putting your case forward. We had Vanessa, Mark, John, Stella, Sally, Matthew, and to be honest, there was a whole lot more, but I ran out of space on my little sheet of paper, so I would have taken everyone's points down, but they're all completely valid. at the core of it, 59 units on this site is a complete overdevelopment for the site. That's what the nuts and bolts of why I'm refusing and supporting Councillor Bolton's refusal motion. And I love the fact that a number of residents actually said tonight that they're not against development in the area. They actually just want to be included as part of that development, have their voices heard in conjunction. And I think out of that, you'll probably hear that there might be an opportunity to actually do more to tackle the urban heat island effect or issues around parking or issues around too many high 3-level story units. So really thankful for the residents for making that. They are open to working with the developer. It would be good, especially if the Harding Street residents could be included in that consultation moving forward. So a couple of points, not enough car parks, it's a clear issue, especially for residents where they have no car space on their actual site. They need a park on the street, which I understand is a number of streets in that area. So it's already congested as it is. Do we really want to make it even more congested, given that's just the state of the street at this stage? There are doubts from a number of residents raised on the validity of the traffic report. That needs to be reviewed, given that a number of residents have called it out. There are concerns around views into people's backyards. There are, I know, Stella, you spoke to the Greens councillors. I heard you loud and clear as a non-Greens councillor as well, so I really loved what you had to say. I fully support more investigation into whether we can, given that we're going to put another 59 cars on site, where's the offset, where's the balance? Are we going to remove some of the central courtyard areas to put more car parks in the area, because it's not enough at the moment? So I'd really like to see that investigated. Matthew, I'm concerned your car's been hit 4 times. Your insurance must be going through the roof. I don't want to see Matthew having to pay more for his insurance. So there are a number of reasons why I'm supporting Councillor Bolton's alternative motion to refuse. In response to the developer, Greg, and I understand that might be the applicant with you. He didn't want to speak himself, but that's okay. I understand you said that the expert councillor officer supported your proposal. I count at least 17 amendments from what's actually been put forward. So they're obviously not comfortable with what you put forward. They've put 17 additional things on. Well, I'll put another 2 on with Councillor Bolton and refuse it. So pretty simple one for me.
And Councillor Martin, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Councillor Kavanagh. Firstly, I'd like to thank all the residents for coming out here tonight. I know, being on the other side in the gallery previously, it is a little bit daunting getting up and speaking to councillors. I'd also like to thank some of the residents who have also given what I can only describe as a very robust set of notes for us to read over the last couple of weeks. So thank you very much for that. To the residents that have suggested that we need more solar and more green space, yes, I can't agree with you more, but unfortunately we can't mandate this. We can't say to developers, you need to do this. It needs to happen now. We can't mandate it.
Nothing for the public.
Looking at the difference between the applications as well, I do commend the developer in looking at it and amending its plans along Connolly Street. I think it's great that they did actually go and do that. And I can tell the residents in this area tonight that your area is going to densify. There's going to be development on the site at some point, and it's going to densify, and it's going to frustrate you. I can tell you that with confidence that at some point this will happen. I do, however, share the concerns with what a lot of the residents in here have said tonight. And really, I can't support the application as it stands. And I am supportive of Councillor Bolton's alternative motion. My primary concern is that this development does not actually meet the neighbourhood character of the area, and I'd like to see that amended. So I'm supportive of this alternative motion. Thanks.
Councillor Tappenhorst.
Well, thank you. I also rise to support the alternative being proposed for the refusal, and perhaps if it's okay with Councillor Bolton, I just wanted to reiterate 2 points from the previous resolution when this application was considered previously, because I think they are quite valid, and that was point 5 and 6, which was in the committee meetings. And perhaps I'll propose if perhaps they could be included in these motions, just to reiterate that Council recommends VK uses its discretion to not afford the application's transitional provisions because of the significant difference between the original plans and the amended plans, and these changes to be considered transformational. And 6, in the event that VCAT determines that the transitional provisions do apply, the Urban Planning Committee reiterates its strong preference that the development in this area reflect the standards of the neighbourhood residential zone, which is now in effect.
I'd be happy to accept them if Councillor Farnley is happy.
Okay,
That's great. So we can incorporate
so they become
that
points 3 and 4 of the new
from the original resolution. So I'll speak in favour, and I do insert those because I think they're quite important, because what has happened here is that we've had an applicant put in an application which has been amended subsequently numerous times, and we're only really considering this because there is this notion of a transitional provision, and the neighbourhood residential zone does not really apply to this application. Now, the neighbourhood residential zone was adopted at least 2 years ago now, 3 years ago, and yet we're still dealing with this application based on that transitional provision. And I think we need to say enough is enough. This application does not warrant transitional provisions. This application is remarkably different from what was originally proposed. And we're here today. The original application may have even lapsed at some point. So I think VCAT needs to really take some consideration on that point first and foremost. So I think it's important that that's included in the motion. And I hope they do, because we know what we want to see in the area, and the residents know what they want to see in the area, and we've done the work. And that's reflected in the neighbourhood residential zone. It's reflected in the neighbourhood residential zone, particularly provisions that talk about 2 stories, protection of backyards, creating dwellings that are livable, and livable for not just the residents that are existing in the street and in the neighbourhood, but also residents that are moving into them. So I do think that needs to be the core element. And when you judge it based on that, then no, it doesn't meet that planning scheme. It doesn't meet those objectives. There's no real difference between Hardy Street and Connolly Street. Why is one 2 stories and one 3 stories? It's all in our neighbourhood residential zone now, so it should meet that standard. It should be 2 stories right across the site. So I think that's quite important. And when you have a look at that and you judge it based on that criteria, well, those rooftops, sure, they may have some value in some areas, but this is not the place. This is not the place for it. It does not meet the neighbourhood character provisions. There is nothing like it really in the street. So I know it's a big sigh, and I know the suburbs transitioning, but as residents, we've made a bit of a compromise in Brunswick. We have said strongly for our planning policies that we are happy to see development and growth in our activity centres. That's along the public transport corridors, that's along Sydney Road, that's along Nicholson Street and Lygon Street. We're happy to see some growth there, but what we expect is that our neighbourhood areas, our neighbourhood residential areas, will be locked down and protected. And I don't think this application protects it. So I don't think you can have it both ways. We know where we want to see development, and this is not the place. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor,
thank you. Just very quickly, I'd like to commend the community for acting as a community, but I'd also like to commend Greg, because that would have been fairly intimidating to come and speak against all those people ultimately, because you were speaking against them. And I'm hoping that the changes that have already been made in the plan are an indication of how much more it could change, and potentially you have an opportunity to set the bar where it needs to be set for developments in Moreland. So I just commend everyone for getting involved and bringing this to us personally, because it's quite important for that to happen, I think.
Any other speakers? There being no further speaking, would you like to close the debate? Yes.
Just really a couple of points. I think I would like to pick up on the point that why treat residents of Hardy Street differently to residents of Connolly Avenue. I think, I think they're, especially Hardy Street being a very small street, I think that's a very important argument, the sort of consistency across the side, because certainly I gather that because of poor notification, residents in August were aware about the development in Connolly Street, and a lot of the residents in Hardy Street weren't aware, so that when mediation happened, then it meant that at that point, because the Connolly Street residents were more engaged, therefore the developer made amendments which helped the Connolly Street residents, even though they didn't go far enough, but it indicated that really the developer responded to the fact the community got organised in Connolly Street, and it was only a bit later that people heard about the development in Hardy Street. So I think there does need to be a consistency across the site. I think it is very important if the council does refuse this development, so that there can be more mediation to develop a much better proposal. Thank you very much for the residents for the work that you've done.
Right, thank you. Thank you, Councillor Bolton. Now, just to clarify, councillors, because the points 3 and 4 were accepted by the mover and seconder, we're voting on all 4 points now. Councillor Bolton and Councillor Farley's first 2 points, and the 2 that were added by Councillor Tapanos. So all 4 points up, yeah?
Just before the committee votes on the matter, can I just raise in relation to ground number 3?
Yes.
Just seek some clarity from the committee that the ground that's then been included is that council recommends VCAT uses its discretion not to afford the application transitional provisions. Advice in relation to that, the offered advice would be that it's not whether transitional provisions apply to this application or not is not at the discretion of VCAT to decide one way or the other. It's a factual matter as to whether the application was lodged prior to the introduction of the neighbourhood residential zone. So it's not a matter of discretion for VCAT. It either was lodged before the neighbourhood residential zone was included or it wasn't. So it's a matter of fact, and the report before you confirms that this application was lodged before the introduction of the neighbourhood residential zone. So I'm querying whether council, in light of that advice, wishes to progress that ground. The ground then continues on to say that there are because of the significant differences between the original plans and the amended plans, that the changes be considered a transformation of the application. The consideration for the committee, I think, in voting on the matter is then if it's determined, or if we're arguing that there's transformation, or is council arguing that the application should be determined, is the officer's submission to VCAT that the application should then be determined on the original plans as they were submitted with the application. So that would be the effect of that ground. If council was successful, then the application should be considered by VCAT on the original plans rather than the revised plans that have then been the subject of submissions and mediation.
Calvin. Councillor Tapanos, would you like to? No,
Sorry.
Calvin, sorry.
Thank you. I think the view of the committee, and certainly my view, is that this application should be judged on the neighbourhood residential zone. So if that needs to be made more clearly in dot point 3, I'm happy for that to be reflected, although I think it is in dot point 4 very clearly. If there isn't a power vested in VCAT, I'm happy to remove the words after VCAT in dot point 3 uses its discretion, so it should just read that council recommends VCAT not afford the application its transitional power. So uses its discretion too can go, probably, if there is no discretion. But I think that what is clear and what my expectation will be is that to make the arguments very clearly that we believe the neighbourhood residential zone should be the zone that should be considered and this application should be assessed upon.
Can I ask the group manager if that satisfies his concern?
I think what's been suggested is that ground 4 adequately deals with the committee's preference that the development reflects the standard in the neighbourhood residential zones.
So am I interpreting it correctly that you'd be comfortable if ground 4 became ground 3 and we deleted the entire ground 3? Is that correct or not?
Look, the matter is before the committee. I think that in looking at what you're seeking to achieve, it may well be covered by ground 4, but
yeah,
I leave it to the mover and the seconder to consider that.
This highlights the brokenness of the whole process. I think having that in there.
Yeah, well,
yes.
I am happy to also remove these changes be considered transformational if that is going to remove any doubts about the plans. And I think the rest of it reads quite well, and particularly point 3 flows into point 4. So my recommendation to mover and seconder would be to keep the rest as is.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Is that acceptable to the mover and seconder?
I'm happy with removing transformational.
Okay. All right. Okay. I think we're going to do it. All right then. Okay. Is that acceptable to the seconder as well?
I'll be honest, mate, I don't understand.
No, that's right. Okay.
We're trying. So, can you actually articulate, Labros, what you're trying to get with 3 and 4, so we can all be clear?
Sure. So, I guess one of the major issues has been that the lodgement date of this application originally was prior to the new zones being implemented.
Yep.
So the application is afforded these transitional rights effectively. So because the application has been amended numerous times and different plans have been submitted, what I'm suggesting with point 3 and 4, which is really reiterating the previous decision of the council at its August meeting, I believe, was to make it very loud and clear to VCAT that we believe the neighbourhood residential zone is the standard that should be used in its assessment of this application. And particularly point 3 says that do not give it its transitional rights, or it makes a strong recommendation to do that. And then dot point 4 really says, well, if you have to do that, and it just may be the case as we heard by the council officer, but that is a point of law. It's just there's no discretion. There is the date it was submitted, and that's it. Now, there might be an argument about whether it's lapsed. I guess that would come into that discussion. But if that is the case, to still put significant emphasis on this new zone, which is now in play and has been in play for at least a couple of years. So I think dot point 3 and 4 is important, and I think it's important VCAT do give that some consideration.
Okay. I think we're going to put this to the vote, councillors. All right. So I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? All those against? Declare that carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. We're going to move on now to the second report, DED 9016, and I'll ask the officer to give us a summary of the application, please. Thank you for your attendance.
Thank you so much for listening to us. We greatly appreciate it.
Thank you. So this is an application at 52 to 54 Ward Grove in Pascoe Vale South. A little bit of history and context is relevant to this application. So in 2005, a planning permit was issued which required the retention of the original heritage dwelling, which is coloured as white, with the back section of the dwelling to be demolished. That permit in 2005 allowed an extension at the rear of the heritage dwelling, and then an upper level first floor addition to that dwelling shown on white on the plan in front of you. That's the current condition of the site. So what has happened is the existing dwelling has been demolished in full, and currently the site is shown on the screen and it's at frame stage. The proposal before us is an amendment to that permit issued in 2015, and it's for the entire demolition of the existing dwelling, which has happened retrospectively. A front fence and an outbuilding, construction of a double-storey dwelling and front fence, and to carry out works in a heritage overlay. So what we have now is the plan that's being considered today. It's quite similar to the original application, other than obviously because the dwelling has been demolished, it's a new dwelling, which is similar in terms of scale, height, as that approved in 2015. Some additions include some changes to the rear outbuildings, a slight modification to the rear of the ground floor, but keeping the setbacks almost identical. With the first floor, it would be similar again to the approved permit in 2015, except for the balcony is extending 1.5 metres closer to the street and extends to this side, on the eastern side. And the ridge line, the original ridge line of the house is proposed to be increased by 200 mil to conceal the enlarged balcony at the first floor. So this is the proposed plan. It looks very similar to the picture that I've originally shown. There are some minor changes proposed in terms of a widening of the portico and a simplification of the chimney, but it's very similar to the original dwelling that existed on the site. The application was advertised and we received 4 objections, and they're shown on the screen with red dots. A planning information and discussion meeting was held on the 28th of November with the applicant, council officers and 2 objector parties. And the report before you recommends that a notice of decision be issued to grant a planning permit, subject to the conditions required with the amended plans. And those conditions are essentially to remove some of the detailing of the what's proposed. And the reason behind that is so that there is not confusion in relation to that it's not an original heritage dwelling anymore because it's been demolished. But the scale and siding of it is retained, so it fits in with the streetscape, but certain elements are removed so that there's no confusion about it being a new dwelling. Thank you.
Thank you, Darren. Do we have an objector that would like to speak? Oh, please come to the lectern.
Thank you, councillors. My name's Frank Gertz. I'm with my wife, Robin, and we're objecting to the proposed application. We're residents at 62 Ward Grove, Pascoe Vale South. I've been a resident of Ward Grove for over 50 years. I knew the people that built that house and lived in that house until it was recently sold. I submit 2 grounds regarding the application to the proposed planning application, these being: the proposed planning application will create a building that will dominate and not complement Ward Grove's streetscape. And if the proposed application were approved, it will set an undesirable precedent for Ward Grove and the Coonan Sill precinct. The heritage overlay was introduced into Wardgrove following the construction of 3 contemporary residences at the eastern end of the street. Of particular concern were 2 double-storey residences, which are opposite each other, one being on a double block. These dwellings were considered out of character for the area, and a heritage overlay was introduced to stop any further construction of these types of buildings. Here we are today with a proposal to build another dwelling, now at the western end of Wardgrove, again on a double block, and that will again dominate the streetscape and diminish the heritage value of the street. One may ask, what was the purpose of having a heritage overlay at all? Also, what I believe is a perverse outcome of the proposed application is following the demolition of the facade without any permit, now it is proposed to demolish the front fence. Why, except there is the front fence has been partially demolished, again without a permit, and replace it with a new fence because a heritage facade no longer exists. Again, I wonder what is the point of a heritage overlay if it does not protect our heritage? The Council's Heritage Advisor noted the demolition of the building would not have been supported, but again, however, given that it no longer exists, the replacement building was acceptable. I do not believe we should just give up on our heritage values and suggest an alternative. The alternative being that the applicant be ordered to rebuild the facade and front fences as close as practicable to the original structures. This is not a novel approach, and I refer to a couple of examples. I quote the age of 16th of October this year, following the illegal demolition of the Carlton Hotel, which I'm sure you're all aware. Mr. Tristan Davies, President of the Melbourne Heritage Action, said Melbourne City Council needed to, quote, send a clear message that we're not going to accept this sort of thing, end of quote, and the site owners, quote, should be directed to rebuild the facade, which has happened a few times in other parts of Melbourne, like Port Melbourne. In addition, I refer to a case in May 2012, the location being 7 Newry Street, Richmond, when the Yarra Council took a developer to the Victorian Planning Tribunal following a contravention of a planning permit. The developer was ordered to rebuild the original walls brick by brick. Tribunal member Mr. Russell Boyard ordered the walls to be reinstated, quote, as near as practicable to the condition prior to such demolition, excluding the reinstatement of any structural defects, using the same bricks that form part of the original walls. I believe the rebuild of the original facade plus the front fence would go some way in maintaining the heritage aspect for both Wardgrove and the Coonans Hill precinct. Finally, I believe rebuilding of the facade and front fence at 52 to 54 Wardgrove would be a fair and equitable outcome for what I estimate to be some 8 to 10 Wardgrove residents who have completed renovation works while retaining the original facades to their properties. This was done at some cost and at times considerable compliance issue in meeting the existing heritage overlay regulations. I urge the committee to favourably consider this alternative and thank them for their time.
Thank you very much, Frank. Thank you for that presentation. Do we have any other objectors that would like to speak? Yes, thank you.
Hello, thank you. My name is Merri-bek and I'm here with my husband Kevin, and I live at 36 Wardgrove, and I was one of those people that have just jumped through every hoop to apply with heritage overlay, and we did, as Frank has just pointed out, with great cost. I had to jump through hoops. I was trying to get vertical bars of fence, and council said no, it must be horizontal. So now that's where we're going, with horizontal bars, because we were told to play within the rules. Several houses in our street have played within the rules, which is a fine thing and a good thing. Ward Grove is heritage. It should be maintained. This house should be, just because it's knocked down and now it's a new one, that really doesn't matter anymore. It should be rebuilt with the heritage character, and it needs to be taken into consideration. So, yes, I don't necessarily agree with the new build. It just seems to be too big. If you look at the other 2 stories in the street, they're shorter and set back, and I think that needs to be taken into consideration. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any other objectors? Can we have the applicant or a representative of the applicant speak?
My name is Adrian Urato, and I'm representing my parents, Greg and Marie Urato, of 52 Ward Grove. Firstly, we would like to thank all members of the Urban Planning Committee for their time this evening. The process of application has been strongly affiliated with Council's planning officers. We met on several occasions to discuss the best possible outcome to erect 52 Ward Grove. 2 heritage experts have been involved throughout this application: Diane McIntosh, heritage representative for Moreland City Council, and our personal heritage expert, David Wickstead. David Wickstead, principal and heritage expert, had been contracted by Moreland City Council to work on the addition to the heritage overlay of Coonan's Hill in 2011 to 2012. David is extremely knowledgeable of this particular overlay and has provided countless beneficial resources to guide and help us produce this application. We have worked alongside Council's planning staff, Anita Dimitrievich, Darren Camilleri, Philip Priest, to ensure that the application is the best suitable option for the streetscape of Ward. Council's planning officer, as well as heritage advisor, recommended the following, and I quote, under clause 22.06-3.2 heritage, provides Council's policy position to discourage total reconstruction of a heritage place as an alternative to retention. Assessment of the proposal will be guided by Council's local policy at clause 22.06-3.3 for new buildings, which state that it is policy to encourage new buildings and alterations and additions that do not closely replicate historic styles and detailing. Based on Council's policy position and a discussion with Council's heritage advisor, a more appropriate heritage outcome would be for a dwelling of a more simplistic design that respects rather than replicates the existing massing form and sitting of contributory buildings within the street. In example, a new building could reproduce the form and profile of the original dwelling without including the architectural detailing that defined it as a contributory building. After receiving this feedback, David Wickstead agreed with Council's advice and advised us that the best possible outcome in our situation would be to rebuild the home in a simplistic form, as that would be respecting the heritage streetscape of Ward Grove. We agreed with Council's policy and position and stated that we would be willing to fully cooperate with them and would submit a simplified version of the home. I would now like to pass out a comparison image. It shows the original facade and what has been proposed. You will see that the changes are minimal in order to complement the streetscape as well as the heritage values and hopefully satisfy all residents of the area.
Thanks very much. Thank you.
As you'll all see, the top image has been done by David Wickstead. It's a CAD drawing. That's done with all the original RLs of the drawing from the original house. And then the bottom image is exactly what was the original facade. You'll see the brick detailing is exactly the same. Window sizes, measurements, design of brickwork, roof lines in the lower level of the front section, which is what we're here about today. It's amendment for that front section. And yeah, I think personally, and with a lot of other people's opinions, that they are very, very similar. And we've tried to do our best in order to respect other people's, views and opinions and help the streetscape to a point where other residents are happy. And yeah, we understand and respect all of the objectors' points of view, but hopefully they can understand we've exhausted all avenues and continuously cooperated with council as well as the 2 heritage experts in order to complement and get the best result for the entire street. We've also employed David Wickstead to overview and see the project finalised to ensure that our home complements neighbouring heritage values. We thank you all once again and we hope you can agree with our point of view. I'd also like to say the actual father would like to make brief statement, just about some of the works that are happening.
With the home itself, my intentions from day one was always to maintain the home exactly the way it was. Through certain legislation and understanding of what council wanted, we've changed a few details, but this is our family home. This is not a business. It's not an investment. This is our home. I believe that anybody that purchases a heritage overlay or a heritage listed home, it's their duty and their responsibility to maintain and respect it and keep it to its very best for the future. This was always my intentions, and I still believe I will get the result. That what you see there, when my house is finished, anybody that drives past it, it will be like if it's just been cleaned. We're still using every single brick on that home is still on the property. So we're not buying brand new bricks. We're using the same bricks. Anything that's come off that home that's been able to be used, it will be used, and it will go to the same specifications to what we see. My understanding of the home, very clearly, we bought it because we love the home and we want to be there for a long, long time. This is, like I said, something that I made a mistake with certain things that I did, and I understand, you know, it's hard for me because I understand a lot more now than what I understood 8 months ago about heritage. And one thing I will do in the future is make sure that it is pretty much aware to everybody their responsibility and their duty when they do buy a property that has anything to do with a heritage overlay or heritage listed, that they do go to the right information or get the right information, not to council, because it's not council's responsibility. It's our responsibility as people that buy these sort of homes to get the right information, and that's what I didn't do. And this is the situation that I've put my family in the last 8 months. And I'll tell you one thing, it's something that you wouldn't want anybody to go through it, because financially and the stress that it's brought on my family, it's not worth it. You know, these sort of things have got to be really understood very, very clearly. And the right people is the heritage people. Today, I believe anybody that makes a decision on this particular home should be a heritage expert, because I believe that that home should go exactly the way it was. And with what council's supporting us to do, I respect it, is because the house is very, very similar. There's very, very little detail that house won't be the same. I'm sorry if I've spoken a bit loud, but...
That's right. Thank you very much, Greg.
Yeah, appreciate it. Thank you.
Are there any questions of the applicant? Yes, Councillor.
Can I just ask a question about the fence in particular? Now, you're sincerely sort of showing some regret for those actions and want to restore it as close as possible to the original. But is there a reason why the fence has been proposed to be different?
Well, they wanted us to do something else with something a little bit more different, and we thought, all right, we wanted to change a little bit, but at the same time, I'm going to be honest, we have got animals. We've got a couple of dogs. We're going to have one dog because one's a bit old, and we want to be able to have our dog be able to walk in the front of the house and not be threatened, or people be threatened by the dog jumping onto the person, because to me, it's just a thing that, you know, having an animal, the fence is about this high at the moment.
Sure.
Anybody can walk over it.
That fence there?
Yeah, so it's only at 500. It sits at about 500. It's 600 to the top of the pillars where the gates are. So it's only a very low fence, but it was a change that council, we spoke about it with the two heritage people, and they said it would be good if we did change, because we explained to them, we have got an animal, we have got a dog, and we would like to leave our dog around, you know, if we're out in the front of the house, we'd leave him out the front a little bit, and, you know, but the fence is not, to me, it's not a big issue. I'm going to be honest with you. If it's to go on and finish the house, I feel sorry for my neighbours. I've got good neighbours. And, you know, we've got fences missing on the side of the house at the moment because we've had people walk in and steal equipment and, you know, do certain things within the house where it is, and we've put some big fences up. And to me, I don't think it's fair for my neighbours to be put in a situation for, you know, the way that it has been for the last 8 months.
All right, thanks, Greg.
You know.
All right. Are there any other questions? I'm going to move an alternative, from the chair, I'm going to move an alternative to the one that's put before us, councillors. Point 1 remains as is until the point to where it says modified to show, and then an additional A, the reconstruction of the front section of the dwelling to its original heritage specifications. The front section being that part of the original dwelling that is shown to be retained on plans endorsed on the 10th of February 2015 under this planning permit MPS 214-468, sheet 1 of 7. B, the first floor plan modified to accord with the first floor plan endorsed on the 10th of February 2015 under this planning permit MPS 214-468, sheet 3 of 7. C, the retention of the existing front fence and the reconstruction of those sections demolished to its original heritage specifications. D, a colour and material schedule. Then E, the point that says E. Then we add in a point 2 stays as is. We add in a point 3. All construction works referred to in condition 1A and 1C must be undertaken under the supervision of an expert heritage consultant. Point 4, prior to the commencement of the development, the heritage consultant referred to in condition 3 must provide written confirmation to the responsible authority that the detailed construction plans to be used by the registered building practitioner undertaking the development satisfactorily provide for the reconstruction of the original heritage building and front fence referred to in condition 1A and C. An additional point 5. Prior to the occupation of the development, hereby approved, a report from the suitably qualified heritage consultant must be submitted to the satisfaction of the responsible authority, confirming that construction works referred to in condition 1A and 1C have been satisfactorily completed to the original design, specification and standards of the original building. And then what was point 6 becomes point... what was point 3 becomes point 6, what was point 4 becomes point 7, and what was point 5 becomes point 8. And if I have a seconder, Councillor Martin, and I'll refrain my right to speak. I'll close the debate at the end of it. Would you like to speak, Councillor Martin?
I'd just like to, I won't speak too long on this issue. I'd like to thank Greg and his family for coming tonight. I understand that it is a tough time for you and your family, and thanks for touching base before the meeting, and well done to Adrian for speaking on behalf of your family. I can also really understand the frustration that the other residents in the room are feeling. You go through all these hoops to accommodate council, and somebody comes along and knocks it down. I can really understand that frustration from that perspective. And I really do believe that we should protect heritage at all costs. It's so important to protect the areas. We put heritage overlays on there for a reason, and I think it's really important that we enforce that. So I am really supportive of this amendment, and that is that the building gets rebuilt brick for brick, and we see the front rooms and the fence built back to the heritage that we see here in the picture. So thank you.
Are there any other speakers? Okay, well, I'll close the debate. I've known Ward Grove for 50 years. I started school at St Fidelis in Pascoe Vale South, and one of my best friends lived in Ward Grove. And it's always been a street I've admired, and in fact the whole of Coonan's Hill is just a beautiful part of Moreland. And it's absolute testament to council placing on heritage overlays. In my time on council, we've placed over 1,000 properties on heritage overlays, And I can tell you now, when we do it, and I know we're about to do some more in the next few months, councillors, you will find that there's angst from members who are having their property placed on heritage overlays. The last group that we did at Ward Grove, I can remember 3 people in Ward Grove ringing me very angry about having a heritage overlay placed on their property, particularly concerning the potential inheritance of their children of the property not being able to be subdivided, etc. Right? So when we go through that process, councillors, it's an important process. It's a difficult process, but in my view, it will be the next generations, etc., that really see the value of what we're prepared to do. Right? And we saw the example that our objector gave of the Carlton Hotel. I was devastated by that, but another part of me was pleased that finally the people who ignore heritage overlays had come to the fore in Melbourne, and it actually brought the issue front and centre, because we've seen it in smaller developments often, right? But this brought it front and centre, and all of a sudden people that were not interested in planning rules, etc., became interested in it, right? I have a view, and it's obviously not law, but my view is if anyone demolishes a heritage property, my view would be that they cease ownership of that property and it becomes public open space in perpetuity. That's what, if I had my way, that's what I'd be doing. And obviously I'm not in a position to make those laws, but that's what I would do, because I just think it really is so disappointing. The one saviour in this is that with this motion before us, we can return it as much as possible to how it was. And I give credit in that I've met the applicant. Obviously, I've met the objectors and I've met the applicant, and I believe the applicant is genuine in his remorse. But it needs to be placed back how it was. It is so important, right? Ward Grove. You go along there, and that's why people want to live in Kernan's Hill, because it has that beautiful sense, that beautiful retaining of properties all the way from Grundy Grove, Disraeli, Prendergast and Ward in particular. And it's also heritage another way, in that the Blackburn family lived in Louisville Avenue, Morris Blackburn and his wife Doris. Right? It's got so many important facets, and ones that if this council stands for anything, it has to stand for protecting heritage overlays that we've put in place. And so that's why I'm hopeful that the alternative recommendation will be accepted tonight. All right, now we'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? All those against? Declare that carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. Councillors, could I ask for a 5-minute adjournment? Could I have a motion for that? Yeah. Thank you, Councillor Martin. Could I have a seconder? Councillor Boone. Put that to the vote. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried. Thank you very much. We'll be back in 5 minutes.
Moreland, like much of Melbourne, is experiencing a population boom. That means our city is changing. Residents are renovating and extending, and developers are looking to build high-density apartment blocks.
Moreland City Council plays a large part in how this change will occur. And it's not just the big things you need to come and talk to us about. You might not think you need a planning permit to extend or renovate your home, but you do. Here's a rough guide of when you need to come and talk to Council.
The Moreland Planning Scheme determines when you need a planning permit and directs how we'll consider your application. Good planning considers the impact a new building or development will have on the character of your neighbourhood and your neighbours. Things like a heritage overlay, environmental factors such as being close to a creek or waterway that can potentially flood, or even just the size of your block require you to get a planning permit before any work begins. It's important to consider your neighbours in the design phase of your project to avoid overshadowing or privacy issues. In Moreland, we're committed to protecting and enhancing the rich historical fabric of our city. and significant historical sites are protected by heritage overlay. Heritage overlay on a property means you must get a planning permit for all changes to things like fences or even installing solar panels or a water tank. A building permit will ensure that your building is structurally safe and complies with building regulations. It also makes sure that your project is built by registered builders with the correct documentation and essential inspections to be considered safe for occupation. Building permits aren't just for major renovations. You may need a building permit for a new swimming pool, a new fence or garage, even adding a veranda. You can apply to council or a private building surveyor to deal with your building permit application.
Well, the land's in heritage overlay.
It's essential to get the correct approvals in place before you start your house renovation to avoid future fines or insurance difficulties. These things can get complicated, so we recommend you make an appointment to come and see us early in your project to discuss your plans.
Woolonjika, welcome and thank you so much to everyone for joining us this evening at the Coonihan Gallery in Brunswick for the opening of Both Sides of the Street, curated by a respected local Indigenous artist and curator, Kim Thompson.
It means having a dialogue that really centres and honours the voices of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people in this country. And I think what it means also is about doing work that's about solidarity. So not about appropriating other people's stories, not about going off on your own and doing work that you think is solidarity, but actually sitting down and listening.
Initially, both sides of the street, I got the feeling that I was supposed to see that as meaning, Indigenous, non-Indigenous artists being on, both sides of the street. But I think it quickly became obvious to us that, we weren't on both sides of the streets, and instead we were on the same side of the streets. I guess the main point about the work, this particular work, is that language, and language isn't as simple as just the words and the sounds, and there are accompanying elements like body language, gesture.
Both Sides of the Street has a personal meaning for me in a way because I'm mixed and I have to deal with both sides of the street. Like, as a collaboration, we took both of our identities, our skills and our interests, and came up with a project that resonated with that. And it's about the historical references of the Kimberley Point, which is an implement that was developed to sell to colonials and Europeans, and we are investigating the recreation of that implement and its role now.
Okay, have some respect, have some respect. Brett, shut your mouth, simple. You shut your mouth.
You know it's rude not to speak English? You're in Australia.
We've had to stop. We've had to stop. Thank you. Where would you like to take the situation from?
I've seen people being racist towards other people, and I've never known what to do. So when this came up, I thought that might be really practical, because I think more of us should know how to be able to intervene in a safe and effective way. So I guess that's why I came.
And the practical tools are, how do we engage people rather than confront people or name and shame them.
If you can't be bothered learning the language, why don't you go home from where you came from?
Wow. Hey, I love your boots.
Thanks.
Yeah, where'd you get them from?
Market.
So we want to train people in how to get people asking questions and not clashing and having pitched battles.
Then I realised, wow, that's a fantastic way to disengage, because I really did come from here, because I was really expecting you to attack me, to right down here very quickly. So that was really well done.
That's what we want to create, social change through little individual interventions.
Here at Moreland City Council, we've got a new library for you to try, but this one's a bit different. It's open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You see, our website and e-library are just like another branch. It just never closes. You can download thousands of titles as ebooks, subscribe to everything from the Wall Street Journal to Delicious magazine, all delivered right into your hand for free. You can stream your favourite documentaries and indie features. There's even programs for the little ones. With our huge selection of adult, teen and children's titles, you're bound to find something you like. We've got over 7 million songs for you to stream, with everything from Mozart to Jay-Z. You're able to work out to your favourite artist just by pressing a button. We've got stories that talk with audiobooks for times when, well, you've got your hands full. And the best thing, like always, it's free with your Moreland Library membership. This is just the next chapter in how our libraries are here to help you. In Moreland, we're all about the good times. At Council, we bring you free events and festivals, from our smaller, intimate community celebrations to our large-scale premier events. We've got your social calendar booked all year round.
Okay, we're now dealing with DED 9116 563A, Pascoe Vale Road, Oak Park, planning permit application MPS 216 157. I'm sorry. I've neglected to ask for a resolution to open the meeting. I apologise for that. Could I have a resolution to do so? Thank you, Councillor Riley. Could I have a seconder? Councillor Booth. All in favour? Against, declare that carried. Thank you, councillors. Okay, so as I said, we're dealing with 563A, Pascoe Vale Road, Oak Park, planning application. Thank you.
Councillors. This is the application for the redevelopment of the Oak Park Aquatic Centre. The slide up on the screen is an aerial view of the subject site and shows the facility as it exists today. The application proposes construction of new buildings associated with the sports and aquatic precinct. It comprises a new aquatic centre, which includes 3 outdoor pools, gymnasium and multi-purpose facilities, a new sports pavilion, an upgrade to the car park, and alterations to access to Pascoe Vale Road, which is known as a road zone category 1, and removal of 18 trees in an environmental significance overlay. So this site plan shows the proposed buildings. So that's the 2 existing sports ovals, the new pavilion proposed between the two ovals, the new aquatic centre building, and the 3 new pools. And that shows the location of a proposed water slide and the car park. Sorry, this picture's not all that clear, but the car park wraps up and around the oval. Next slide is just a close-up view of the proposed aquatic buildings and the pools. And some photos on your screen showing the existing conditions. So the top 2 photos are looking at the site from Pascoe Vale Road, looking south and north with the existing entry. And then this bottom photo is at the end of Edgecombe Street. In terms of planning controls, the site's in a public park and recreation zone. It's affected by a special building overlay which relates to flooding, an environmental significance overlay, and it abuts Pascoe Vale Road, which is a road zone category 1. For this application, a planning permit is required to construct the buildings in the special building overlay and the environmental significance overlay. Permit is also required to remove vegetation in the environmental significance overlay and to alter the access to Pascoe Vale Road. And that alteration is through the internal reconfiguration of the car park, including additional car parking. There's actually no physical change to the access. In terms of what does not require planning approval, the uses on site, because they will be either managed directly by council or on council's behalf, they do not need a planning permit. And the car parking that is provided on site meets the requirements of the planning scheme, so there's no reduction of car parking sought. In terms of public notice, we sent out approximately 230 letters in addition to putting signs up on the site. We received 3 objections, and they're the red dots that you see up on that map. The main issues raised in those objections were increased traffic, particularly in peak operation times, the use of Edgecombe Street for bus parking and an entry point into the car park, and the proposed hours of operation for the centre. We held a consultation meeting on the 8th of November. No changes have been made to the plans following that meeting. So the key considerations for the application are whether the new buildings are acceptable within the special building and environmental significance overlays, whether the tree removal is appropriate in the environmental significance overlay, and the implications of vehicle movements to and from the existing entry points as a consequence of the changed car parking arrangements. And the officer recommendation is that the application is supported, as the development will provide an improved community facility and there is an opportunity for replacement planting. The traffic movements are considered acceptable and Vic Roads have not objected to the application. Thank you.
Thank you, Narelle. Do we have any objectors here this evening?
Nick Dolby, West Brunswick. Do I object? I object to one part of it. Otherwise, I strongly support this proposal. I strongly support this improvement on a community facility, giving basically swimming pools and sports facilities to people in the local community within a walkable distance, and I encourage Moreland to retain all its swimming pools and sporting facilities. However, the report discusses bicycles. The Moonee Ponds Creek shared path is on the Moonee Valley side of the creek, but there's a spur line, if you want. There's a bridge crossing at Margaret Street, and there's an existing track leading to the back of this facility. In the report, it recommends that the applicant, the proposal does not change the current alignment. Yes, Moonee Ponds Creek not affected. The applicant has confirmed that signage will be erected at the end of that path, that spur line, to instruct cyclists to dismount from their bikes to prevent conflicts of users in this area. Now, should not the council be encouraging people to access this pool and facilities by bicycle, and therefore improving the access to the pool in particular, but also the sports facilities by bicycles. There's a request for people to walk. I hate to say it, usually it's ineffective. If you put a sign up saying cyclists walk, it tends not to be effective. I won't go into reasons why. Among other things, why can't people ride their bikes to the pool? Oh, of course they can ride their bikes to the pool. They can ride their bikes to the pool via Pascoe Vale Road. Pascoe Vale Road is not a cycle-friendly road, unfortunately, and I do believe that there will be many people, children, families and others, accessing this pool along using the Mooney Ponds Creek path, using this spur line, and I believe that in the development proposal there should be a route to the swimming pool and the sporting facilities for cyclists. That's all.
Thank you very much, Nick. Do we have any other objectors here this evening? Do you have a representative of the applicant? Yeah, I think so. Yeah,
Thank you. I'm Greg Gale, the Manager of Capital Works Planning and Delivery here at Council. The Oak Park Pool project is an iconic project for Moreland Council. It's a facility that the Pascoe Vale and the wider community have great connection and a long history with this facility. It's also an important facility from a regional perspective. It's the only facility in the region suitable for holding swimming carnivals. And I understand it's also the largest project ever for Moreland Council from a budget perspective. Communities had the opportunity to be involved in the development of this project over the last couple of years, including information sessions held at the existing facility itself, and most recently even down to the design of the new water slides. Community feedback is valuable in any format and should always be considered. But I think that having only 3 objections to such a large project is a positive thing. And it signifies to me that we've been successful in reaching the community throughout the project development and hearing their needs. From Council's perspective, the project is well supported from across the organisation, including our transport and urban design teams. Whilst it's largely a sport-orientated precinct, the open space team support how the facilities interface with the recreational areas, as well as the landscaping requirements to compensate for any of the tree removal. The ESD elements of the project are significant, reflecting the requirements of the Moreland Sustainable Buildings Policy that was implemented in the last 12 months or so. This includes collection of stormwater for toilet flushing, etc., solar PV system, rain gardens to treat stormwater runoff from the car park. The pool design also includes an ultra-fine filtration system, which significantly reduces water usage compared to the traditional sand filter systems as a result of the backwashing process that won't be necessary, and also reduces significantly the chemicals used in the water treatment. This will also be the first real opportunity for us to demonstrate the benefits of an independent commissioning agent, which is a role that focuses around the efficiency of the plant and equipment in the building, which is a feature of the Green Star system, and also a requirement of our sustainable buildings. I don't really have further to talk about, but I'm happy to take any questions.
Greg, can I ask your response to the objection regarding the lack of access to bicycles?
Bicycle path. So there's the existing bicycle path connection from the creek, which terminates in the area just between the two. Design and the location of the pavilion, it was important that the pavilion fronts on and facilitates use of those 2 pavilions, those 2 sporting ovals. The path actually the existing path comes right up to where that pavilion is, so where the proposal recommends that cyclists dismount at that location. They're effectively at the facility, they're right at the pavilion, they're just not right at the front door of the aquatic centre. So it's just a matter of walking that last section. The primary reason around The signage recommendation, just when the ovals are being used, there's going to be a lot of spectators and users around that area of the pavilion, and it's quite a tight space in between those two ovals. So that's the best alternative.
Thank you. Other councillors have questions? Okay, thank you very much. Councillors, do I have a motion?
Yes,
Yep. You're moving the officer recommendation, Councillor Riley?
Yes.
Okay. So Councillor Riley moving the officer recommendation. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Martin. Would you like to speak to it, Councillor Riley?
I rise to support this motion. It's obviously a major development in our city. There's been a lot of preparation and work being done for this. So I just want to thank Council for all the work and the community for all the input that they've had into this consideration. And I put with the clarification around the dismounting of the bike as a bike ride. I think I can live with that, Nick. I hope you can too. And urge people to support this recommendation as is written. I won't read it all, it's rather long.
Yep. Thank you, Councillor Riley. Councillor Martin?
I mean, yeah, fully supportive of this proposal. 41 kilowatt solar array stuck on top as well, double glazing windows. I mean, this building's fantastic. The facility is going to be fantastic. It's just great for the community. And, you know, we're just really happy to be going down that water slide with a few of my fellow councillors in a couple of years' time. So, thank you.
Excellent. Would anyone else like to speak to this? Yes, Councillor Bird.
Just very quickly, I'd like to note on behalf of the Mayor who's not here, the fact that the elephant has been retained because I know that it means quite a lot to many people in the community, and so I think she might mention that if she were here.
Yep.
So, regards, Helen. Councillor Davidson.
Thank you. Councillor Bolton.
Actually, I do have a question for the applicant, if
Yes.
that's okay. To really ask a question if it is feasible to improve the cycling access, if that is if it's feasible space, if there's a route that the cycle path could take so that it did go right up to the pool. I mean, I haven't really properly.
Yeah, I understand what you're asking. I guess the way we've developed the design, we've considered with the existing infrastructure that's there and utilising the existing route that exists. So we're not terminating the existing route. We haven't extended it all the way through. I guess as a separate exercise, if you like, through the bicycle strategy work, we could look at whether there's a way of altering that existing route, whether it can go down one side or the other of the oval to be able to get it around to the front. We can have a look at that. But at the way, there's no option at the moment to extend that existing alignment through that facility without generating that clash with other users.
Thank you. And you're willing to take on that work and have a look at that again? Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, thank you. Thanks. Thank you, Councillor Bolton. Anyone else? Well, we have a motion before us, so if there's no further discussion, I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried. Thank you. Thank you. Next item is Nicholson Street, and it's DED 9216, 55 to 63 Nicholson Street, Brunswick East. Planning permit application MPS 2016-398. And I think our Officer Robert is on his feet, so thank you, Robert.
Thank you, councillors, and thank you, members of the gallery. So the fourth item for this evening's meeting is an application 55 to 63 Nicholson Street in Brunswick East. It involves an application for a 7-storey building, which includes a rooftop deck, 2 shops, 1 food and drink premises, 77 dwellings, and basement parking. Subject site is marked yellow in the bottom corner of the site. It's Zone Commercial 1. As you'll see, it's surrounded by a mix of zonings. So you've got a mixed use general residential and residential growth zone to the west and south, and then obviously Commercial 1 to the north and to the east. 3 objections were received to the application. The key concerns that came out of it were building height, car parking, overshadowing and overlooking, but obviously a full list of the objections are up there. The officer made contact with 2 of the objectors, the 2 nearest to the subject site. The key issue, I guess, with the proposal is the overall height. So the Design and Development Overlay 23 talks to a preferred maximum height of 18 metres or 5 stories. As proposed, with a 7-storey building, we're at 24.7 metres. So that's almost 7 metres above the preferred maximum height. As you'll see, that's what the building is proposed to look like. In terms of as I said, the height is the key issue. In looking at what is an appropriate height in the area, the DDO talks to looking at what is a consistent street scale. So there's a number of developments which have been approved and are either constructed or under construction in the nearby precinct. So at 65 Nicholson Street, we have a building at 18 metres, one at 85 Nicholson Street at 19.3 metres, one at 91 to 93 Nicholson Street at 20 metres. Again, this proposal is 24.7 metres. What the officer's recommendation is that as proposed at 7 stories, it is too high. So the proposition through the officer's recommendation is to delete level 6. Essentially, that's at the 7th floor, so it would be a 6-storey building. It would still be 1 storey above the preferred height in DDO 23, or 1 metre. So the DDO 23 talks about 5 storeys or 18 metres. By deleting the top level, you'll have an overall height of 19 metres. So that's essentially the key issue. Thank you, councillors.
Thank you, Robert. Do we have any objectors here tonight? Okay. Do we have a representative of the applicant? Thank you.
Thank you, councillors. My name's Sam D'Amico. I'm the town planner acting on behalf of the permit applicant in this matter. I'd firstly like to say that this has been a collaborative application in that we've had a number of pre-application and post-application meetings with council that has led to the recommendation that you have before you. It's actually already dropped a level from the original application, and through negotiations with council officers, there have been recommendations to lose an additional level, but also to increase setbacks from the laneway. And I'd like to thank the planning department for that approach, because I actually think it's resulting in a very good outcome to date. Given the large size of the site, almost triple of those to the north, also in the commercial 1 zone, and even larger to those within the residential zone to the west, and being the entry to the Belf Park precinct, the applicant has sought right from the outset to make this a landmark building for the site. They've engaged multi-winning architect in Clark Hopkins Clark, and a range of sub-consultants that have looked at matters of ESD, waste, traffic, accessibility, noise, and of course planning right from the outset at pre-application stage to make sure all those features were incorporated within the development. If I can quickly discuss the design rationale. The design seeks to retain the commercial properties fronting Nicholson Street, and then seeks to turn the corner into Miller Street and design a residential interface to transition into that residential zoning directly to the west of the site. Car parking's been accessed from the laneway, and that's been done to ensure the retention and not diminish the streetscape to either Nicholson Street or Miller Street. The proposal has sought to activate the laneway through the incorporation of some ground floor apartments facing the laneway, that also leads to passive surveillance of the lane through that incorporation of dwellings. And from a height perspective, whilst the DDO provided a useful starting point in terms of setting a preferred 5-storey height limit, it was quite clear when looking at the physical context in terms of the approvals to the north of the site that essentially that horse had bolted with the 6-storey approvals that have occurred there. So you might be asking, why are we at 7 stories then? And simply, we've looked at it from a physical context point of view. As I mentioned earlier, the site is substantially larger than those other sites that have provided a 6-storey built form. The site is located on a corner, and we saw it as an opportunity to bookend the development. So from an urban design outcome, it makes sense to have a somewhat larger building located on the corner. But having said that, the size of the site is large enough to mitigate any off-site amenity or bulk impacts created by that upper level. And I think when you look at the perspective drawing that's been provided and that was on that diagram there, you can see that very thin top line is actually the top level that's sought to be deleted as part of that condition. I think it's also noted that there's 3 objections, and I've been instructed that one actually withdrew either yesterday or today, and that is the adjoining property at number 37 Miller, as a result of discussions and the increase in setback from the laneway that we've been willing to undertake as part of the negotiations with council, which shows a real appreciation from, I think, the local community about the importance and the value of this particular building. From an internal amenity perspective, there's obviously some rooftop terraces that are provided at various levels, providing close to 500 square metres of communal open space. And the apartment sizes themselves are relatively generous. Now, I will mention that there's about 10 out of the 77 that are about 3 to 4 square metres below the MADSI requirements of 65 square metres for 2-bedroom apartments. However, in relation to that, there's a vast majority of the apartments that are actually substantially larger than the minimum requirements set out by MADSI. I'll also add to that that those apartments actually face the open courtyard and are located on a corner, and that allows some better light and ventilation to those apartments and to ensure they have a much wider and broader outlook, so they're not small enclosed apartments. From a sustainability perspective, it's achieved 6.5 stars through communal external clothes drying facilities on the roof, solar hot water, cross ventilation to 40% of the apartments, and obviously the thermal efficiencies from having rooftop gardens at the various levels as well. So with that, I'd like to respectfully request that the council uphold the officer's recommendation and support the issue of a no decision. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any questions for the applicant?
Oh, sorry, no.
Yes, I
You do? Yep. Councillor Farley.
Has this developer built in Moreland or Melbourne before?
It's actually a relatively new company, so it's made up of a number of people from various other development companies. So they have built, although not the applicant, I think, is called Lucent Capital. So that company itself is not, but the people involved in it have built a number of times. I personally have been involved with the applicants in these other companies, and I've also been involved with the architects on quite a number of projects and seen their finished product on a number of occasions.
Thank you. Any other questions for the applicant? Thank you. Thank you. Any questions for our officers? Do you have a question for our officer? Yep.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm a bit naive in this space. How much does it cost approximately to go to some developer like this to go to VCAT? What would the cost of going to VCAT be? approximately?
So, good question. Look, it comes down to, you've got an application fee. So your application fee, you're looking at perhaps, major case, about $4,000. I guess then it depends on whether the applicant was to call expert witnesses. A 3-day hearing could easily run into $60,000 to $80,000 with experts.
Okay, I will take you on that.
I could probably answer that a little
okay, go on.
accurately. Realistically, with holding costs for a site of this nature, you're probably looking in the order of $300,000 to $400,000.
Okay, thank you. See. Any other questions for our officers? Okay. Do I have a motion?
Actually, I do have a question before you go to a motion. So the officer report recommends the deletion of one of the levels to bring it back to 6. And the image there is obviously of a 7-storey building. So which level, what is the setbacks, I guess, on the top level in the officer recommendations? Like, is it the 6th level or the 7th level, or is it another level that's being removed? How does that really work?
Yes, I can respond to that. So my understanding is that the intention is to see the deletion of the 6th floor. So fundamentally, that top floor would be deleted. So that floor has increased setbacks, because that's correct. Those setbacks are greater than the lower floors. I'll have to skip through, sorry. So there's your 5th floor. So your 5th floor would fundamentally be the top floor plan, the top floor of the building.
And you still have the roof terrace above.
That is correct. And from an elevation perspective, what you'd be looking at is, sorry, see if I can find the Nicholson Street elevation. That would be the top of the building. The top of the arrow would be the top of the building. Obviously, you'd have your rooftop deck above that. So, yeah, that line there, which is bringing it to an overall height of 19 metres.
Thank you. Councillor Bolton.
I've got a motion that a refusal to grant an amended planning permit, number MPS 2016-398, be issued for the construction of a multi-storey mixed-use building comprising retail premises, dwellings and basement car parking, use of the land for dwellings, removal of easements, drainage, light and air and overhanging eaves from TP 410611V and TP 55335T, and the encumbrance on TP 41411R for that part of Lot 1 that abuts Nicholson Street and is 1.22 metres wide and 36.58 metres long, a reduction of the standard car parking requirement, waiver of the loading bay requirement and alteration to a road in a road zone category 1 at 55-63 Nicholson Street, Brunswick East on the following grounds. 1. The proposed maximum building height of 24.7 metres exceeds the preferred maximum building height of 18 metres as specified in Figure 2 of Design and Development Overlay 23, and will fail to meet a key design objective of DDO 23 by not creating a consistent Nicholson Street streetscape. 2. The proposal fails to comply with following standards and objectives from the proposed clause 22.07 Moreland Apartment Design Code that forms part of Amendment C142 to the Moreland Planning Scheme adopted by Council. A. Clause 22.07-42, building separation, specifically the west facing secondary outlook of dwellings 211, 212, 311 and 312 do not meet the minimum building separation required by table 22.07-1.2 and will unreasonably compromise the future development potential of 37 Miller Street. B, clause 22.07-5.2, dwelling size and layout, specifically 10 dwellings do not meet the minimum size standards in table 22.07-5.2-1 and are therefore not suitably sized to meet the need of future occupants.
And that's a notice of refusal. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Martin. Would you like to speak to that, Councillor Bolton?
Well, probably my main reason for proposing this a motion to refuse is because the proposal does exceed the building height, the recommended building height. And while it is true there are some other proposal developments which have exceeded the building height, 3 of them in Nicholson Street, I think it will be totally meaningless if we don't start to enforce the building height for, which there was extensive community consultation about the building height for the Brunswick Structure Plan. I think we do need to send a message that, if developers developing in Moreland, they need to stick by the heights which are clearly known. They're on the council website as part of the Brunswick Structure Plan. Secondly, I think it is really worrying that 10 of the dwellings don't meet the minimum size standards. I think the minimum size standards are something which we need to have implemented on a statewide basis. But I think starting in Moreland, our policies become a joke if we don't actually implement these expectations from the community as a result of widespread community consultation. So I think we should reject it. I understand that it has been a collaborative project with council officers and there's been some to and fro, and yes, the developer has agreed to some amendments to the proposal, but I really think that Moreland's policies are well known, especially in the development industry. I think we either have to insist on abiding by these policies or else change those policies. So I feel that we need to implement these building heights.
Thank you, Councillor Bolton. Councillor Martin?
Yeah, really quickly. I think the building in itself, is quite an attractive building. I like the architectural designs, but we have standards. We have standards on height and on minimum apartment sizes. And so I just ask that the developer go back and redraw them up and, look at it so it doesn't have to come to us to, look at the fact that it does exceed the height and the fact that there are those 10 dwellings in there that don't meet our minimum size standards. So, please go back and come back to us. Thank you.
Councillor Tapanos.
Thank you, Chair. Councillors, we do have planning laws, that is true, but our planning laws don't include the word mandatory height controls, an issue that we've been advocating and lobbying for. So I think really you need to assess this application on its merits, having a look at the whole application and the whole planning provisions that apply to it. And when you actually go through all of those and you have a look at what else is quite significant in planning law, and sometimes we complain about it, but it does exist, and that is precedence. I think when you have a look at the precedent of other planning applications that have been granted, and when you have a look at this application in its entirety, as an entity, and what it contributes to the city, I think you'll find there are significant benefits. So I am going to foreshadow an alternative, and the alternative is the officer recommendation with one inclusion, and that is an additional dot point hour I believe it is, and that is modifications that are necessary to ensure that all dwellings have a minimum size that meets the mall and apartment design code, which is at least 50 square metres for all one-bedroom dwellings, 65 square metres for all two-bedroom dwellings, and 90 square metres for three-bedroom dwellings.
So you're foreshadowing that.
So I'm foreshadowing that. And look, there's a couple of things I really do like about this application. I do like its design. I think that it is in a good position as far as local amenities, transportation, Belf Park right behind it, a school right adjacent to it. So it is a prime location to have increased densities in our city. People heard me earlier on in regards to Stuart Sheets say it's a compromise planning. We want to protect our residential areas whilst we need to encourage and find areas for additional densities elsewhere. Well, I think this is a prime area on a public transport corridor for additional densities. And when we get a lot of these applications, and received a lot in the past, we often find that there is too many one-bedders and it's not well designed and the materials are not the best. And I don't think that's the case with this one. I quite like the fact that it's got a mix and the vast majority are two-bedroom apartments. I like the fact that there is a three-bedroom apartments. I do think it is providing for a diversity of housing, which is what is needed in municipality. In the place, our policy says we should have more housing. Now, I know that it doesn't meet the policy 100%. Very rarely do applications meet the policy 100%. But I think this one overwhelmingly provides more benefits than detriments and should be approved. And just in regards to those policies, as I said, we don't have mandatory heights. I wish we did. Everyone around the room knows my advocacy for mandatory heights. But how can you honestly sit there or go to VCAT and argue that up the road there's 6, across the road there's 6, there's 3 or 4 applications with 6, and argue, no, this must be 5, when our policy, whether we like it or not, does not say it's mandatory. It's one more level. And there's so many benefits that the application provides. The design code, once more, I noticed the state government introduced its design code, or put that on the public agenda sort of last week. It's not embedded, but I think that is a significant document, and that is something that's really important to improve the amenity of apartments. So I think that should be complied with, even though technically it probably doesn't. But I put a lot of weight on that one, so I think that little amendment is important. And I think it's achievable by the applicants, and it will lead to better outcomes. So I'm willing to foresee that this is one story extra, because it's a far better application than many of the ones we've seen in our city.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Farley.
I'm going to come at this from a different angle, Councillor Tapanos, but I will be supporting your foreshadowed motion. I actually have a lot of empathy for what Councillor Bolton actually said regarding it's too high, and I agree with that. So I just want to, I think the approach moving forward is how do we actually combat that? The reason I asked that question earlier was because if this developer goes to VCAT, it's going to be, we'll take the officer's quote, 60 to 80k approximately to go to VCAT. They're not going to go to VCAT with and ask for the council officer recommendations. They're going to go to VCAT and ask for everything. Because the council officer recommendations didn't have the support of council. So they're going to get the 7 stories. And that's my biggest concern. I think the council officer recommendations with the foreshadowed changes to make sure that each dwelling has a minimum size to meet the mall and apartment design code. The council officer recommendation to delete level 6 to address the height issue. The setback, the expanding the visitor bicycle parking, and modifying the basement car park so cars can much easier access it. At least brings compromises that the community would actually be after. If we vote for refusing this, the developer certainly wouldn't go to VCAT and ask to reduce what the original application actually is. So That's what I'm worried about. So I'm just coming at this from a practical, pragmatic perspective. I think if we were to say to the developer that you can build, but you can only build if you delete, stories or expand your apartment size, they may accept that and move on. There's a chance that they'll still go to VCAT and ask for everything, but that'll be a gamble they have to take. And the other thing that VCAT will take into consideration is that council issued a permit with these compromises, so at least we've got council sort of giving a voice as to what we're actually after in terms of compromises.
Thank you, Councillor Farley. Councillor Bood.
Thank you. I won't be supporting Councillor Tapanos's foreshadowed motion because although I can see that the development has ticked the boxes with regard to the size of the dwellings, in terms of 1, 2 and 3 bedroom. I feel like when you're talking about a development that's within walking distance of 3 very distinctly different primary schools, including a public school, a Catholic school and a Danish or German school, it's probably worth considering that we want to try and encourage developments that are aimed at housing families because although I do have a Greens hat on, I'm very concerned about development for families heading into the food bowl out in the outer reaches of Melbourne Metro. And so I think it's very important that when we consider development, we consider that families need to be able to live in the city of Moreland as well. And when I looked at the plans of this development, I noticed that some of the dwellings are 2 bedrooms, but they're not designed with families in mind. They're designed with, 2 young professionals maybe sharing together because it's potentially higher rent. And I just think and so I'll be supporting Councillor Bolton's motion specifically because I agree with clause 2B, that there's an opportunity here if you're going to spend $400,000, which is probably one or 2 bedroom apartment, to actually set the bar a little bit higher with a better quality of design, so that, sure, meet the ESD standards, but meet them high instead of low. And, I think there's an opportunity for something a bit better here.
Any other speakers to Councillor Bolton's motion?
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
To the officers? If the 6th floor is deleted, how many of the buildings don't meet our minimum apartment sizes? Do we know?
How many of the units?
How many of the units? Yes, thank you, councillors. In the report on, sorry, I don't have a full copy of the report here, but I will tell you 10 of the 77 dwellings don't comply and with the minimum apartment size. The minimum apartment size, a 2-bedroom dwelling, 65 square metres. 10 of them are at 61 square metres, so they're 4 square metres short.
And how many of those would be on the unit that we're deleting? The ones that don't comply, I think is the main point of it. Yeah.
Well, like I said, the 2 proposals do make sure that it complies, or one's a rejection and one's an approval with that complying 100%.
Yeah, I'd just like to know, just out of curiosity.
So page 103 of the report, 4 of the non-compliant apartments are located on the 6th floor, which would then mean there would be 6 compliant.
Okay. Thank you, Robert. Thank you. Councillor Bolton, would you like to close the debate? Anyone else want to speak? Councillor Bolton.
I don't accept Councillor Tapanos' arguments. Yes, it is true that we don't have mandatory heights. The state government wouldn't allow us to implement mandatory heights. And yes, it might be true there are 3 buildings up the road. Why don't we just pass this? I think one thing when I first got elected to council, I had a lot of residents complain to me about the fact that council was trading so many things off we'll give you a little bit of this for an extra floor here or extra story there. I think when we had that massive public consultation around Planning Amendment C134, there was a massive consultation. People expected that this would be something that council try to actually implement. I think residents would be really furious if they realised that council was passing developments above what had been widely called for amongst residents, what council voted for. It basically would mean that the decisions we take in council on these matters are a joke. Why would residents have any confidence in us if we pass successive development applications which go higher than the preferred limit according to public consultation? So I'd certainly call on my fellow councillors to support a refusal. And I'm particularly concerned also about the dwelling size. I mean, it's always a case where developers can go to or use the threat of going to VCAT to try and persuade councils to, give us this little bit extra so that we don't go to VCAT. But that doesn't necessarily always work. Sometimes it can be a bit of an ambit claim. We'll do this if you don't do that. So I think we shouldn't accept the bluff.
Okay, so Councillor Bolton has closed the debate. So just to be clear, councillors, we're putting the motion of Councillor Bolton, seconded by Councillor Martin, for refusal. So we're putting that to the vote now. All those in favour of the refusal? All those against? I declare the refusal carried.
Can I have a division?
You can have a division. So just to go again, councillors, those who voted for the refusal, could they raise their hand again? So we've got Councillor Abood, Councillor Bolton, Councillor Martin and Councillor Riley. And those against the refusal, we've got Councillor Rafali, Councillor Tapanos and myself. You've got that, Saskia? Thank you very much. We move on to the next item. That's DED 9316, 21 Pentridge Boulevard, Coburg, Notice of Ministerial Permit Application 215-35890. Okay. Officer, thank you, Noel. Oh, sorry, excuse me, Noel. I did forget. And thank you, Councillor Abood.
Thank you. There's nothing after this, is there?
No, you don't, so you can have an early evening. Councillors, can I remind you we're now at quorum, so we can't have anyone going to the toilet or we'll be out of quorum. Okay, we'll just wait for Councillor Abood to leave the area and...
You can stay for the debate, can't you?
No.
No.
What was that? Can you clarify that?
No, you can't stay for the debate, you can't hear the debate or see the debate.
Yeah, I have to, Alice has left.
Which is a bit ironic.
Thank you.
You could go and put it on computer, but anyway.
We haven't thought about that, but there's nothing we can do about it.
Yeah, I know, but it's how it is. Thank you, Narelle.
Thank you, councillors. This matter relates to notice of a planning application from the Minister for Planning for a 19-storey building at 21 Pentridge Boulevard in Coburg. Up on the screen is an aerial photo showing the site. So the yellow arrow is pointing to the subject site. On your screen there, it's obviously within the Pentridge redevelopment site, with Pentridge Boulevard directly to the south of the site. In terms of the statutory controls, the site is located in an activity centre zone and is affected by the heritage overlay, environmental audit overlay, development contributions plan overlay and car parking overlay. The master plan for Pentridge is an incorporated document planning scheme, and the height diagrams from that master plan form part of the activity centre zone schedule, and a 19-storey building is identified in that schedule. The site is registered with Heritage Victoria, and the proposal requires their approval also. So because of that Heritage Victoria registration, heritage considerations sit with Heritage Victoria and cannot be considered as part of the planning application. In terms of a little bit of the background, the Minister for Planning retained responsibility for this application when Pentridge, the responsible authority status for Pentridge, was handed back to Council in October last year. The Minister for Planning has not given public notice to the community of this application. In December last year, the Minister first gave notice to Council of the application for a 19 and 9-storey building. So the two schemes you see down the bottom is the original proposal that we were given notice of. So 19-storey and 9-storey building. So in January this year, Council made a submission to the Minister objecting to the proposal. Then in December this year, the Minister has given further notice to Council of revised plans for the proposal, and you'll see that revised proposal to the right. You see the revised design as well as a reduction of the rear building to 6 storeys. So again on your screen you see a comparison of the proposal that was originally considered by the committee back in January and the proposal that's before the committee tonight down the bottom. So the new proposal has been altered to reduce the rear building to 6 storeys, as I said. There's been a reduction of 30 dwellings to provide a total of 190 dwellings. There's an inclusion of 5 3-bedroom dwellings in this current proposal, and there's been significant changes to the appearance of the building, as you can see. The amended proposal has responded to some of the original grounds of objection relating to the design of the building, and the key planning consideration is how the proposal responds to the objectives of the activity centre zone, noting that the height is consistent with the zone. And that the dwellings also have good internal amenity. An assessment has been undertaken against MADSI. So the officer recommendation is that that Council maintains its objection to the proposal regarding those 4 dot points up on the screen. So the creation of what we consider to be unnecessary access points, removing original wall fabric. No affordable housing is proposed, is encouraged by the activity centre zone. There's a lack of accessible housing, and the stormwater management hasn't been addressed. The recommendation also includes that Council advises the Minister that we consider that public notice of the application should be given. And the attachment 3 is a draft of that submission, and it also includes suggested conditions of approval should the Minister determine to support the application. The recommendation also includes that a copy of the submission be provided to Heritage Victoria. Thank you.
Thank you, Narelle. Is there any member of the public that would like to speak to this? Thank you so much.
Michael Hamilgreen, Coburg resident and member of the Pentridge Community Action Group. I have circulated some comments on this proposal to all the councillors, and I'll just speak to the main concern, which is related to the height of the 90-storey height. While the council officers have said that council doesn't have the say on the heritage aspects of this, it does have the ability to advocate and to recommend, and this letter that is proposed to be sent, I think, is trying to do that and doing that very well in some areas. But in the case of height, I don't think it's sufficiently addressing the problems associated with height that deal both with heritage and with wider issues of amenity within the Pentridge heritage area. So I draw your attention to the council's executive summary. Council officers 2013, commenting on the master plan, said they had concern that more height has been directed to the northern end of the site, noting that this is the third iteration of plans increasing height of buildings at the northern end of the site, with the 2003 scheme seeking 6 stories plus 2 levels of parking, 2009 schemes seeking 6, 7 and 15 stories, 2013 scheme seeking 8, 9, 13, 16 and 18 levels, and now in 2016 we've got the developer proposing a further increase to 19 levels. And the same Moreland Council planners expressed concern, noting that the potential detrimental impact on the use and enjoyment of Coburg Reserve as the high-rise buildings potentially overwhelm this important passive recreational space. So these perceptive and very much to the point comments on the part of the Moreland planning staff remain as valid today as when they were advanced 3 years ago, if not more so with all the newly revealed plans to create more towers of similar height in what will become a mini Manhattan in the very centre of this iconic Melbourne heritage precinct. The new high-rise proposals are like putting up a group of 9-storey timeshare apartments in the middle of Port Arthur, or high-rise apartments in the grounds of the Tower of London, and take no account of the fact that this is no ordinary commercial and residential precinct. And of course the developers make a virtue of the heritage nature in terms of attracting people to live here. So instead of proposing a substantially reduced height or opposing the development outright on the basis of the enormously destructive impact on the whole heritage values of the site, the present council proposal in the draft letter in attachment 3 seeks to object to some loss of heritage values in the bulldozing of yet another Swiss cheese-style hole in the bluestone walls. And certainly objection to this is welcome and very warranted, but to overlook the major heritage destruction by the very height of the tower is like worrying about a wart on your nose while being in complete denial about a massive tumour growing in your chest. So despite the council's own recent debates and concerns about the height of this tower and the more than 100 objections to it already lodged with Heritage Victoria, the opposition to it from the National Trust and our Wills Labor previous representative Kelvin Thompson, the council appears to be sticking to its original council planning officer's submission sent to Heritage Victoria on the 23rd of December last year about the height of the tower. In this submission, the council planning coordinator declared, quote, on the basis of the building heights envisaged in the activity centre zone and the master plan, council officers have no objection to the proposal. So that's the council officers speaking in 2015 compared to how they were speaking in 2013. So this massive new 90-storey development that will dominate the whole heritage precinct represents a new and crucial moment in where the current development of Pentridge is going to damage irreversibly the heritage values and fabric of the site, or whether by scaling it down to a height consistent with the height of heritage surroundings, for example, no higher than existing bluestone buildings, the heritage character of the site may still be preserved. If Moreland Council does not make serious efforts to seek a reduction in the height and scale of this proposed 90-storey tower, and others to follow later on the same scale, at this meeting, the present council will be contributing to an irrevocable and fateful destruction of the overall heritage values and fabric of this iconic location, all for the sake of what Kelvin Thompson has aptly described as high-rise slums of the future. So the present Moreland councillors used to be remembered, those who might decide to follow the example of municipalities like Fremantle, whose old Fremantle jail of the same vintage as Pentridge has been properly preserved, is a major tourist site, and is now registered not only on the state but also the National Heritage Register, thereby attracting Commonwealth heritage funding, unlike Pentridge, which appears to have been delisted nationally precisely in order to make way for the current overdevelopment. Or they can choose to be remembered as councillors who chose to irreversibly destroy the overall heritage character of this iconic heritage site, to the detriment of not only those who might potentially want to visit and learn about the historic site, but also the amenities, traffic problems and property values of those already living within the site. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Michael. Thank you. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak? Yes, please come forward.
My name is Adelaide Hawkins. I live at 19 Julia Street, Coburg North. I find it very interesting that these plans have come again in December with little notification. Also that no decision has been received from Heritage Victoria. So this is very concerning, both as a member of the community and also as a historian. I'm not sure, I understand there are problems with the fact that the minister retains control over the site. However, I believe that the council can strengthen the objections that it sets out in its letter. For one thing, we've come up about the minimum apartment sizes. We have no notion yet from the developer, do we, about the sizes of apartments, all that, I think some 5 3-bedroom apartments. So, I mean, there is a community concern about whether this is just going to be whether this will be an owner-occupied, whether we're just going to have transient people. And I think this should be sort of articulated as an issue to be addressed. In terms of the heritage, I think it comes out as, you know, the blue stone wall and that's it. But a 19-storey tower will have an effect, A, on the site itself, but also on listed buildings. And I believe there is a clause within the state planning scheme, I think it's 15 or something, which talks about having an impact. So I think there is room for manoeuvre, that there could be a contradiction about giving such approval and on the other hand saying that it's not supposed to have a negative impingement. There's also the environmental impact of such a 19-storey building, because you're going to talk about a substantial number of people living in such a dwelling. Where are they going to take their recreation, parking, etc.? So even though it's heritage, the heritage has sort of wider implications. And I think that in such a letter, I think there should be stronger points. At the moment, I mean, an ex-public servant is a bit weak. It's sort of like, oh, it's a fait accompli. And I think we should stop it. And my last point is, as a resident of North Coburg, most of the people who I talk to are not aware of this impending building. It's going to be, if such a building goes up, it will be a complete shock to the community. This is, you know, despite Shayhurst community, the awareness is really low out there. And I think it'll be quite an after reaction to this building should it go up. So I just ask that the council strengthen its response to this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Very excellent. Do you have any other? Yes. Thank you, sir.
Good evening, councillors. I'm Rob Stansel. I'm one of the Pentridge Community Action Group members. And I have a clarification really I seek in relation to the ACZ, is it? The mentioned in your slides, you said that the ACZ, in relation to the heights of the building, that the 19-storey was acceptable in that plan, the Coburg Activity Centre?
Yeah, just ask it through here and I'll...
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, that's right.
So it was reported by council that in relation on the slide, I'm sorry, I can't, in relation to the ACZ being acceptable for a 19... what went through my head there, part of the ACZ, so 19-storey building was identified in that ACZ. Is there any other area in Coburg, in the activity zone, that accepts a 19-storey building? I mean, that would be my first clarification.
We'll come back to you.
And the second thing is, I mean, our concerns, as my previous speakers have already mentioned, I'm not going to go over the same detail, but there is a mention in here on page 146. You say that that there was a I've lost it now. About halfway through, it says Council made submissions that the concept of marker buildings is generally supported, but Council's preference is for taller buildings to be located centrally within the site. Now, here we've got an application for a building that is smack up against the walls again. In fact, that is the picture for this whole development, and all the way around a ring of buildings that are smack up against the wall. And you can see from the pictures of the supporting documents you have here of how puny and insignificant it makes the heritage listed walls and guard towers look. So I think that, you know, that's certainly seemed to be an issue before, but we're quiet on it now. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I ask the officer before I ask you, is there the question about the 19 stories, is there any other part of the Coburg Activity Centre that encourages 19 stories?
Not outside of Pentridge. The maximum building heights in the rest of the centre are 10 stories.
Thank you very much. Any other speakers tonight? Thank you.
Good evening and thank you. My name is Helen Deans and I'm also part of the Pentridge Community Action Group. And there were just two other little things that I wanted to add. There were we believe, we've heard that there were over 100 objections to the 18-storey building to Heritage Victoria, and we would like you to please be aware of that. Each of those people who have made the effort to put in an application would surely be appalled at the fact that they're attempting to go even higher. The other issue that I want just for you to be aware of or to remember is there's an extraordinary glut of apartments in Melbourne in the CBD area. 35,000 was the figure cited much earlier this year, and there are so many other developments happening all the time. The glut is just going to get worse and worse, and this is just going to add to it. But apart from that, I absolutely endorse all the other comments that everybody's made. So thank you.
Is there anyone else who'd like to speak? Okay, being no further speakers, councillors, would you like to? Yep, I think Councillor Bolton might have a motion, I think.
Alternative motion. Do I need to read out the whole?
No,
we've read it.
Okay. Okay.
I think Councillor Tapanoff didn't know.
I was hoping not. So, basically, I'm moving an alternative resolution which incorporates all of the council officers' recommendations with an additional point C. That the submission at attachment 3 be amended to include the following additional points under the heading Heritage Considerations. The council has concerns that the towering nature of the 19-storey building will dominate and overshadow the heritage listed buildings, the prison wall and watchtowers due to its form and scale. That is, it will undermine identified heritage values. The proposed 19-storey building will dominate the landscape for kilometres and become the dominant structure within the precinct. The clause 15.03 of the Moreland Planning Scheme states, encourage appropriate development that respects places with identified heritage values and creates a worthy legacy for future generations, while the Moreland Planning Scheme clause 22.6-3.3 states, encourage new buildings and alterations and additions that respect the existing scale, massing, form and siting of contributory or significant elements and do not dominate the heritage place or precinct. And the 19-storey building would not create a worthy heritage legacy for future generations. And the following additional points in relation to the planning permit application. That first dot point, the building will impinge on smaller existing residential developments, particularly with major overshadowing for the adjoining east and west apartment blocks. And the scale of the development is likely to swamp the narrow streets surrounding the proposed development with traffic, which could be hazardous for access by emergency services. Then one little bit appeared to slip off, which was that council would support the height of the building being scaled back to no more than 8 to 6 stories.
Okay, no, it's a mover for that motion. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Tapanos.
I'd absolutely support the comments which have been made by the submitters tonight. I think it is really problematic that the issue of height was left out of the letter of objection to the minister, both on amenity grounds but also heritage grounds as well, because I think the heritage can't be totally extracted from Pentridge. It's part of the whole. It does have to be considered in with the planning permit, even though I know that, or I understand that it doesn't form a ground before VCAT. I also think, and I think it is, 19 stories. I agree that this will come like a shock to most Moreland residents. Even often a 10-storey building comes as a shock to a lot of Moreland residents, let alone a 19-storey building. I think there will be a lot of people who will be aghast, and the council will get many complaints if this building does go ahead and people suddenly realise what's happened to their environment. I think it'll be the same with other building applications in the Pentridge area. But I also think there are important amenity issues for the residents. I think the overshadowing by a 19-storey building, that is a very, very long shadow. And the report makes mention of a number of areas being in shadow by 2 p.m. daily. I mean, I think there are a lot of people who live in the surrounding area of this development application who are not aware that they will get that degree of shadowing. I also think that there is a very valid reason for objecting to the height of this building in addition to the points that I've already mentioned, because yes, the very original application on this site was for a 15-storey building, or council did approve a 15-storey building on this site originally. But since then, there's been a whole consultation process around the Coburg Activity Centre, the C123 planning amendment, which now has unfortunately gone through, which allows for quite large buildings in the area of 10 stories and so forth. It really does mean that there are changed circumstances now compared to when that original planning application went through. I think this means that really, I think height is a valid concern once again. I think if this building goes up, I think we will start to see applications for similar scale buildings in the centre of Coburg, or maybe certainly buildings that are higher than 10 stories that are currently allowed for. I think we'll be allowing a precedent to be set. Now, I know that already, unfortunately, some planning applications were passed prior to the Coburg Activity Centre being enacted in law by the planning minister. But I think now these buildings in Pentridge are just so far above what's already been endorsed for the Central Activity Centre. I think we really do need to make our objections on height very strongly, in addition to the other points that have been put forward in the report by council officers.
Thank you, Councillor Bolton. Councillor Tapanos?
Very briefly, I do agree with everything mentioned by Councillor Bolton. I guess I'm actually not sure where to start with this application. Look, I don't agree with the master plan. I don't think our community agrees with the master plan. I know council has numerous resolutions about it. So really, we need to tackle this issue there, and we need to make sure that heights the two core issues in this debate. There's so much wrong with this application. When we're normally here in the Urban Planning Committee, when we have a look at buildings adjacent to heritage property or alterations to heritage property, one of the key things we look at is how it impacts, visually how it impacts on the heritage property. So you can't say that a building of that size and that scale doesn't impact on the heritage value surrounding it, even if it is the wall and the little tower on the end. It clearly does. I really don't know how it compares with the good design code. I really don't think there's a lot of detail. There's still a lot of detail and questions that I would have about the application. But I just can't get past the heights. And quite frankly, I just can't take the application serious form. So I don't know what more to say. This should just be rejected outright, and our strong lobbying and advocacy to the state should continue.
Thank you, Councillor Tapanos. Any other councillors like to speak to this? Councillor Martin.
I mean, I completely agree with what else has just said. I think that the 19 stories is just completely unprecedented, and it is quite frankly ludicrous in my mind. I mean, I just can't believe that they're considering it. I mean, the overshadowing, the visual impact, the heritage impact. I mean, and also the fact that there's quite a few things that don't really add up for me at the moment. You know, the fact that, well, I'm quite shocked that the minister didn't give public notice on the development. I'm also concerned that there's over 100 people have gone to Heritage Victoria with concerns, and we haven't even seen that yet. So for me at the moment, there's quite a few things that don't add up, and I completely support the alternative motion.
Any other councillors like to speak to it? I might just briefly, if that's all right. I think the indictment of this is particularly on page 196 of the agenda. When you look at the watchtowers and the walls, you really have to look twice to even notice that they're even there, to be honest. It's like completely bizarre when you look at it in that context, yeah. And, this minister has been much better minister than what we've had previously in some things, but in Pentridge, doesn't seem to be so. In other things, he's been much stronger. He's increased planning application fees. He's done a few things that are, finally you think, well, they're starting to listen, but on this, not at this point. That's all for me. Any other speakers? Being no further speakers, I'll put Councillor Bolton to the motion to the vote. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried unanimously. Councillor, that concludes the officer reports tonight. Just before I close, I want to thank the attendees tonight, even if they've already left the public gallery. I'm appreciative of their efforts tonight. Those who are watching on Council's website. Also, of course, our council officers who have put in an enormous year at UPC. We're grateful for your work throughout the year. And councillors who are around the table tonight, and who are members of the Urban Planning Committee, but also the members of the previous Urban Planning Committee who are no longer on council. It's been an enormous year for the UPC, so thank you to them. And before we close the meeting, wish everyone a very happy Christmas, and we'll see you next year. And I declare the meeting closed.
Thank you, John, for chairing.
Done.